Korga and the others of Wraith Company filed out of the elevator. These Xenos were nothing like the flashier Eldari or the mindless slaughterers that had come before. They fought with tactics and used technology that suggested a civilization on the rise. To the Imperium, though, that rise was still in its infancy. In 1,000 years, they might have been dangerous. There was no time to wait and find out. The lift doors opened onto hundreds of armed aliens. Their gear was superior and their firepower potent. Several dreadnought-like walkers trained heavy barrels on Korga and his men. Kaan's yell cracked across the pad. Down! Without hesitation, Korga and the other warriors hit the deck. Outside the transparent observation panes, gunships had taken up station. Weapons rotated, and a storm of fire shredded the aliens on the landing zone. Torsos were pulverized, bodies torn open. Korga heard Kaan's furious roar over the comms. He did not watch. Bolter fire tore into lower limbs. Xenos and the dreadnoughts alike were ground into sludge and scrap. Korga moved with the same exhausted discipline he always wore. After he finished the last breathing alien with his chainsword, he reported flatly, "This is the last batch." "No," Kaan snapped back. "There are more. Not until every alien on this world is dead." Kaan dropped from a gunship, chainaxe in hand. Marius Gage landed beside him. "Go up and kill the rest. The princes are en route. We don't have time to dally." "They have nowhere to run," Kaan said. The aliens' rifles were crystal energy weapons that could burn sustained fire and make trouble even for space marines. As bodies collapsed, several figures wearing crowns and a black-robed silhouette sprinted for a transport. The engines lit and the vessel lifted. Then Kaan raised his bolter and fired at the engines. "It has shields," Gage warned over the Vox. The alien ship pitched and tried to turn away, but the system perimeter had been sealed by the Imperium. It could not escape. It swung, trimmed its attitude, and began to rain fire down on the pad. Lasers struck inches from the charging Marines. Steel began to melt, and they sought cover. "Anti-air," someone shouted. Korga barked an order for artillery support and glanced at a hatch on the transport's side. An alien inside swept the landing with a machine gun. Kaan was closest. "Cover me," his voice cut through the comms. Kaan bounded across the pad, agile and fearless. Gage cursed and opened up. Bolter rounds shredded the alien, locking the hatch. Blood and tissue spat into the cargo bay as terrified screams echoed from inside. Kaan leapt, caught the rail, and clung on as the pilot tried to shake him loose. Waiting for the moment the pilot corrected the craft's attitude, Kaan used his momentum to wrench the ship sideways and pry his way into the transport. He breached the cabin and found a dark muzzle aimed at him. Bolter fire slapped his armor, and one beam pierced his forearm. Blood spattered across composite. He slammed the hidden gunner with his axe. For a breath, he saw a human face. Then the doubt in him vanished. Around him, aliens raised weapons and aimed. The chainaxe spun its teeth, and carnage began. A force field flared. Kaan cleaved the nearest alien's head off and leapt, shielding his helmet with an arm as beams stabbed through his shield and into the flesh beneath. A searing pain took his arm, but he kept fighting. The alien's weapons were deadlier than those below. He cleanly severed one creature's leg at the knee, then used the haft of his axe to shove another out through the hull. He smashed a third into a flat, silencing its scream with a brutal fist blow. 3 more drew energy swords from their waists. Kaan moved the chainaxe like a longsword, a technique he had drilled for a week. The blade found a seam in armor and drove in. The rotating teeth turned the creature into scrap and screaming. He seized another by the throat and snapped it like a twig. The last he split cleanly in 2. The cabin filled with corpses and torn meat. In the deep hold of the transport, a few survivors huddled, royal family members by the look of their crowns. "We surrender," the crowned king cried, stepping forward. Kaan's breathing came hard in his helmet. He keyed the comm. "This is Kaan, captain of the Warhounds. The aliens wish to surrender." "You finally decided to report?" the reply crackled. "Have them land the ship. Tell them the Warhounds accept their surrender." Kaan hesitated. "But just don't fall out of the sky first. Marius Gage will know how to handle it." Kaan still could not understand why the Legion Colord would accept these aliens' surrender so readily, but there was no time for argument. "You damned aliens," he announced as the transport settled back to the pad. "Today is your lucky day. The Legion Colord accepts your surrender. When the hatch opened and the alien royalty climbed down, the sight of human bayonets and armor made their fear visible. They were rounded up like cattle. Korga even snatched the alien king's crown to add to the Warhound's Hall of Triumph. Marius Gage noticed Kyan's arm, a bleeding hole through the gauntlet. "Are you injured?" he asked. "A mark of a warrior," Kyan said, grinning through the pain. Gage's eyes dropped. The sight of Kyan's reckless valor reminded him, uncomfortably, of his own gene-sire, a man who refused counsel and always charged headlong. Gage had been terrified for him then, and now he felt the same for Kyan. When we return to the 500 worlds, he thought, we'll have words. But for the moment, there was praise to be given. 2 gunships set down. Angron was the first to disembark, Gel beside him. Gilliman watched from the other craft, puzzled by a small black crate left on the ground and the presence of a human operative on an alien world. Angron paid it no mind. He walked to Kyan and clapped a massive hand on the captain's shoulder. "A bold move," he rumbled. "I am proud of you." Kyan lifted his chin like a peacock. "As a reward, on the 500 worlds, you will study diligently with Marius Gage." Angron laughed aloud. Gel stepped forward and glared. "Are you questioning His Highness Angron's command?" "If you won't go, kid," Gel said with a half-grin, "I will." The new world had been taken. The Warhounds had kept their promise not to kill the last of the aliens, but the Ultramarines had later executed the surrendering party on the royal landing pad. The whole star system was annexed to the Imperium. The phase objectives were complete. Aboard the glorious Queen-class vessel, Redemption, in the mortuary, the honor guard posted silent watches. Inside the chamber were only Angron and Gel. "Our cousins are very strict about the bodies of their warriors," the Angron said. "Ghost Company only managed to retrieve 4 Ultramarines' corpses. Their gene seed has already been recovered." 4 dead Ultramarines lay on the cold steel slab. Gel had seen to their appearances as best he could. They were tidy and still, separated from life. Angron stood like a machine, and behind him tendrils of data flowed outward, folding into wings behind the Gene-Father. The thin, trembling cables dipped and probed the first corpse. Light flickered along them as the bodies began to tremble. It was the butcher's nails at work, a terrible mechanism tugging at the warp. Angron used the connection between body and spirit to drag the brothers' soul fragments out of the immaterium and, through the authority of the ship's system AI in the physical realm, convert them into raw data. Tendril after tendril sought nodes, imprints, echoes, the scattered shards of what once had been a soul, and reassembled those fragments into files. The tearing between flesh and spirit was clinical and swift. From the first body to the last, the work took no more than 10 minutes. Gel watched, imagining a day when, after his own death, his soul might one day return to stand at the Colord's side. But the prerequisite for that was the complete success of the Butcher's Nails project. "Your cousins sleep soundly beside them," Angron said softly. "That is their honor," Gel answered. "No," Angron said. "This is not honor, Gel. This is a precaution. This is the pure spark of humanity. The shadow of Nuceria is like this, and so is the Butcher's Nails project the Legion pursues." Gel's brow furrowed. "Who are our enemies?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. He had seen much across the galaxy, but he could not yet imagine an adversary that demanded such extremes. "Where are we?" he added, uncertain. Angron's cold eyes met his. "The warp, sire. Section 82, that's it." Gel's eyes narrowed. After the initial surprise, his expression settled into an almost unnervingly calm mask. "Gel," Angron said quietly, "humanity is a great ship that can be capsized at any moment. The Emperor is its helmsman. I will not stake everything on a single ship, nor should you." The words hit Gel like a cold tide. He looked up at his Gene-Father. "No matter what the future holds, the Warhounds will always be your most loyal scions." "I hope so." Angron sighed and patted the commander who had stood by him since his return. "Now, let's go see the human Khorne brought back." Wraith Company, interrogation room. Angron stood with his arms crossed in front of a one-way mirror. Inside the room, the entire Wraith Company was assembled. Directly across from Korga, 2 Night Lords stood among them. Night Lords who had not left, but had been integrated with the Warhounds. After Angron's communications with Conrad Kurz, those 2 would act as ambassadors for the Night Lords attached to the Warhounds and as tribunes for the Nostramans on Nuceria, protecting Nostraman rights and interests there. This is a cult agent, Gel said, an apostate. The chief apothecary found signs of artificial creation. Angron's brow tightened. Artificial apostate, technology of Xeno's provenance? He glanced at the small black box on the interrogation table. What's in that box? He asked. Gel relayed the Adeptus Mechanicus's findings. An STC fragment, a production line for some sort of weapon. Angron's mouth curved. Regardless of the voyage to the 500 worlds, the Warhounds had taken a valuable prize. However, Gel's tone wavered. Speak freely. Angron stared. There was only one weakness he could think of among his scions, their squabbles over relics. Sage Krill-Zeth and Sage Lorgar are fighting over that STC fragment. Krill-Zeth wants to send it to the magma world for secure study. Lorgar opposes him. He says Krill-Zeth has taken enough. Gel rubbed his temples. He'd been losing sleep over how to allocate the fragment. What's so hard about that? Angron looked at him with a faint disappointment. Then give it to Lorgar. Gel's eyelid twitched. Consulting the Legion co-lord about everything, this was an infuriatingly simple solution. Still, what could he do? Yes, my sire. Angron gestured. Also, tell Khorne to study hard with the Ultramarines. I'll test him when he returns. Understood, Gel said. Angron watched the artificial apostate being prodded and questioned inside the mirror. He asked softly, Do you want me to come in? If every Tom, Dick, and Harry required your presence, Gel said dryly, you'd lose too much face. The system AI's tone cut in, clipped and impatient. Do you have plans for the voyage to the 500 worlds? I have plans. Civil, military, medical, aid. I've had Gel put the documents on your desk. Angron's voice rose. Don't tell me you haven't read them. What do you do all day? Stare into space. I read them, the AI protested. Perhaps my memory is not what it used to be. Angron's rapid interruptions filled the channel until the redemption guard watched him twitch, then fall silent. The guards exchanged looks, then turned to stare at the ceiling. Sire has angered the co-lord again. One thought ran through them. Just get used to it, another replied. No one volunteered to help. Later, in the conference room, Gel's voice echoed over the hollow table. They don't have special forces. The Ultramarines' data is very balanced. He tapped through simulations. Khorne's intelligence shows Captain Remus Ventanis of the Ultramarines' first chapter commands battlefields like a template. Around the table, Warhound's captains argued as they simulated ways to beat their cousins in open combat. The holographic projection flickered with wave after wave of assaults. Gel, as overall commander, saw his plans fail again and again. According to the system AI's calculations, with Gel's present command skill, he would be defeated by the Ultramarines on their 347th counterattack. In other words, he failed. The room fell into a tired silence as positions were flattened beneath the blue tide of Ultramarine counterattacks. From the initial surprise strike to the AI's exhaustive simulations, the advantage should have tipped to Gel, but war allows no shoulds. Angron watched the reports, then said, As you can see, the 500 worlds at full strength are not something we can contest directly. Gel shook his head but did not argue. The only legion we've ever truly beaten was the Night Lords. Even so, the Warhounds had already lost over 2/3 of their forces in prior confrontations. Facing Ultramarines, Dark Angels, and Night Lords, and supported by the methods of the Legion co-lord, the officers ran dozens of simulations, not isolated skirmishes, but campaigns where Nuceria served as a rear base. In one of the second simulations, to everyone's astonishment, Gel captured Guilliman. It was absurd. Even Angron found it ridiculous. This is the advantage of charging into battle, the system AI said, broadcasting Guilliman's habit of leading from the front. The AI's disembodied voice continued, cool and didactic. 25 chapters, 250,000 Ultramarines, with reserves across the 500 worlds, and yet Guilliman still fights on the front lines. Locally, that inspires his legion. But I do not want you to learn that habit. You are commanders. Your purpose is to bring victory to the Imperium and to humanity. Rashness is unwise. Angron does well by not indulging it. Angron set aside a book he'd been pretending to read and raised his head with a faint look of pride. The system AI powered down the holographic projections. You heard it, the words of the Legion co-lord, it said, prompting Angron to address the captains. He stood abruptly. The AI squealed a warning. Perhaps it would have been better to keep him seated. The fleet emerged from the warp above Macragge, heart of the 500 worlds. A temperate bastion shaped under Robout Guilliman's guidance, Macragge was one of the Imperium's political and cultural centers, second only to Terra. As Angron looked down, he saw void torpedo nets and battlecruiser patrols, a navy that made the world airtight. He let his mind briefly entertain barbaric solutions, strike from within, strike from without, or simply level it, and then dismiss them. Feeling discouraged? He asked Jell. Jell watched Macragge sail past alongside the Redemption. No, I'm thinking of when Nuceria can be that prosperous, its own supply lines, no longer dependent on the War Council or Mars. It will happen, Angron promised. I hope Khorne learns from the Ultramarines, Jell added, thinking of the scion tossed back by the affair. Khorne, meanwhile, sat hunched over a pile of Ultramarines' manuals under the supervision of Marius Gage. He gripped his pen with a furious intensity that pleased the Ultramarine instructor. Khorne's progress was quick, though not quick enough for their cautious ways. For the Ultramarines, thinking beyond the blade, civil administration, logistics, politics, faith, was as much a battlefield as any siege. You can't expect your axe to build a conquered world, Marius said with a dry chuckle. I know, Khorne snapped. But that doesn't mean I can't break his face until his nose is bruised. You can't beat him that way, Marius replied bluntly, and Khorne's expression fell. Marius admired Khorne's ferocity and resented his barbarism toward his gene-father. He'd brought in 4 instructors of his own caliber to train Khorne in other arts besides killing. Marius scanned the feedback data and allowed a small smile. The Ultramarines are grateful for what you did. I've found several teachers, men as good as I am, to instruct you. Khorne's pen sank and rose. He kept learning. The Warhound's future would depend not just on how they fought, but on how well they could rebuild, administer, and hold what they conquered. 83. Section 83. Section 83. When Marius Gage said it with a smile, Khorne felt immediately that something was wrong. He stood and walked straight for the door without a word. When it opened, dozens of victors trained their weapons on him, eyes hard and unblinking. Is it too late to leave now, my cousin? Marius asked. Marius watched Khorne's retreating figure. Volume 1, Chapter 123, Ardent Faith. At the Macragge orbital shipyard, the Redemption docked with a slow, certain grace. The hatch opened, and Angron strode out. Not far away, Guilliman stepped down from the other side. Angron, Guilliman greeted. Brother, it is your turn to host me now. Angron looked at the Ultramarines gathered before them. Their armor was not the pure blue of the normal Ultramarines. It was blue and gold, festooned with badges and marks celebrating past glories. The ship's systems pushed names and dossiers into Angron's head. Aecos Lamiad, hero of Conor; Taros Nicodemos, hero of Cylindris; Valentus Dolor, hero of Oculum; Stelloc Aethon, hero of Lycius. These 4 were not only political heavyweights across the 500 worlds, they were Guilliman's favored veterans, each ruling dozens, even hundreds of worlds. Angron registered the talent, but it meant little to him. He had the nail. If you wish, the 500 worlds welcomes you at any time, Guilliman said with a laugh, then glanced at his scions. It seems some of you are already impatient to host your cousin. Guilliman clapped Angron on the shoulder. Come, brother, I'll show you the culture of the 500 worlds. Angron watched his ostensibly relaxed brother, and for the first time saw a side of Guilliman he had not known. Jell, he called. Gell, one of Angron's followers, trailed behind him. Khorne heard his name and for a moment thought he had imagined it. As he braced for more, 4 figures appeared directly in front of him. Marius Gage, this must be the champion who saved the Lord of the 500 worlds, one of them declared. Aecos Lamiad and the 3 other heroes looked at Khorne. His throat tightened. A flicker of fear passed through him. Cousins, Khorne managed, attempting to explain. That's right. This is my student, the warrior who saved Lord Guilliman. Jell of the Warhound sent him to the Ultramarines to learn how to become a proper Archon. But Marius would not let him explain further. He smiled at the 4 heroes. A champion? I adore champions. You're Khorne, right? Your skills must be impressive. Come to the octagonal cage. Valentus Dolor slapped Khorne on the shoulder. The four heroes read Marius's expression and, trained by years of wartime camaraderie, instantly knew how to look after this guest. "Ha ha ha, cousin! I won't boast, but a spar would be possible." Khorne laughed, keeping his fear thinly veiled. Planet 678913. Beneath a howling blizzard, a giant walked unarmored by ornate plate, ribbons whipped in the wind, and oaths and scripture scrolls affixed to his breastplate proclaimed his vows to the Emperor and his loyalty to humanity. "Heretical faith has been purged," the giant intoned. When a voice spoke behind him, the giant turned. "That is why we are here, Khorne." Lorgar, the 17th son of the Emperor, stood on the ruined human fortress and smiled, pleased with his progress. He struck his massive Crozius down into the snow-scoured stone. It rang cleanly. Lorgar's Crozius was called Lumen. "Angron has returned," he said, almost to himself. "Yes, another Primarch," Khorne answered from behind. He watched Lorgar's back, but could not read the Primarch's face. "Do you think he will join us?" Lorgar leaned on Lumen, eyes narrowed as he watched his scions return to their transports. "Who knows? Forgive my bluntness. I do not know." Khorne hesitated, then offered, "Inzar Tyrus." Lorgar knew the name, Inzar Tyrus, a theologian full of zeal and learning. Lorgar thought he could send the Book of Truth to the warhounds through him. After a long moment, Lorgar nodded. "Very well. For this brother who has not yet come, I have no gift. Send Inzar Tyrus with a copy of the book. I am curious how my brother will react." Khorne was silent. To give a copy of a book Lorgar had written himself, was that wise? "I hear that, although Angron is brutish, he has a fondness for reading. Perhaps there will be common ground," Lorgar chuckled, not knowing what the warhounds truly needed. "It would also serve as a test. Inform Terra that the word-bearers have conquered another world," Lorgar added, voice steady. "Tell them to dispatch the colony ships." "As you command," Khorne replied, backing away. Lorgar did not turn as the Thunderhawk hovered over them. He closed his eyes and for a moment seemed lost in contemplation. "Angron, Angron, will you be a fellow traveler on my path?" The ribbons stilled, the wind died. Lorgar stepped forward reverently and boarded the Thunderhawk. From a distance, Khorne watched him go with a somber look. He had failed in some aspects of shaping Lorgar, succeeded in others. Faith, Khorne thought darkly, is not a flaw, it is the foundation securing humanity's future. Lorgar, thoughts burning with devotion, felt his life's purpose converge on that certainty. The hatch closed. Volume 1, Chapter 124. There are dogs! Check-in style sightseeing. Guilliman watched Angron wielding a loudspeaker, and for a bewildering moment could not tell which of them was truly the lord of the 500 worlds. Angron, bright-eyed and excited, led him through residential districts. They stopped at a school on Macragge. Mortals cheered and bowed. Angron smiled and waved, then theatrically began checking in with the school's database. Guilliman wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. He watched the warhounds begin hauling off the school's teaching materials like looters. "My brother, perhaps you should see the sights of Macragge," Guilliman tried gently. "Our culture," Angron said, and a voice in his head chirped with the ship's system. Collection complete. A nearby factory appeared to be a weapons production line. "Good, let's go see how the 500 Worlds operates. Go, go, go!" "You are right, my brother," Angron beamed. He unplugged a data cable from the terminal, clapped Guilliman on the shoulder, and practically dragged him along. "The 500 Worlds is splendid." "There's no need for such praise," Guilliman said. "I had the mortals prepare a banquet for you and the warhounds. You may be the first such guest the 500 Worlds has welcomed." Angron had no patience for politeness. The 500 Worlds was too wondrous. He was almost intoxicated by it. He yanked Guilliman toward a factory, pulling the Primarch along. Guilliman, newly returned and craving rest, Lady Yvraine still expected him home for dinner, hurried to keep up. "Brother, the technology here is not. I can support you," he called, trying to sound reassuring. "Nuceria," Angron said at last, voice shadowed. "Nuceria is a dead, savage world. Since I arrived there, I was enslaved, Guilliman." His tone broke on the memory, and Guilliman felt real sympathy. "I was forced into gladiatorial arenas, paraded for nobles like a circus animal, my brother. I have never seen a prosperous city like Macragge. This place makes my heart ache." Angron's voice trembled. Every word felt honest and raw. Guilliman, who had labored for years to bring order and stability to worlds, felt a deep, quiet pride at how those efforts had moved his brother. Angron wiped a tear away, then another. The presence of the nail at his side seemed to threaten to choke off his tears, yet he could not stop them. "My brother," Guilliman finally said, unsure what else to do. "If there is anything, say it." Angron looked at him with an earnestness that left no room for flattery. "I hope the 500 worlds can give Nuceria a little assistance." Angron extended a finger, leaving a tiny gap between them. "Of course," Guilliman smiled. "Of course it was for something like this." "Angron, you don't need such theatrics for something small. We're brothers. I'm more than willing to help." "What is it?" Before Guilliman finished, Angron plucked a folder from Gel's hand and shoved it into his. "I just need a little help from you." Guilliman's smile vanished as he opened the folder. He read the list of aid projects and felt the air go out of him. He took a long breath. "Brother, your little help could bankrupt the 500 worlds." Rationality snapped back into place. Without a flicker of expression, Guilliman tore the documents to pieces and let them fall on Angron's feet. Now he understood Rogel Dorn a little better. Angron looked at him. Plan A failed. The machine in his skull, the thing he thought of only as a tool, responded faster than he did. It had contingencies. Plans B, C, D, all prepped and waiting. Angron felt Guilliman's mood shift and tried to gauge it. He had activated the device a moment ago. Why hadn't Guilliman been affected? "You asked for 100,000 Ultramarines to go to Nuceria?" Angron asked, stunned. He read the figures, and the number felt obscene. Thousands of production lines. "Brother," Guilliman said flatly, "this isn't aid. It reads like robbery." Angron barked a laugh that was more like a bark of self-disgust. If only he'd glanced at the document sooner. He rubbed his head, trying to smooth the moment. "You know, Guilliman, I usually don't handle these things." Guilliman's eyes narrowed. He moved in close, as steady as a blade. "My brother, Angron, what did you just say?" Angron swallowed and shrugged. "Most of the affairs, political decisions, I've left to someone else. It works fine." Guilliman lowered his gaze to the small metal thing embedded at the base of Angron's skull and felt that slow, cold twisting of logic. The someone else was the device. A political affairs processor wired straight into his brother's mind. The idea prickled at a dozen moral and practical questions, but Guilliman kept his voice steady. "There are some things that should not be left unchecked." He slid an arm around Angron's shoulder, a conciliatory gesture. "If this device on your head has been doing your politics, then perhaps it should be supervised. You're a Primarch. How about I will agree to your conditions if you let the device be examined, if you take it off?" "I don't want it." Angron shoved Guilliman away and took a step back, holding up a little speaker like a talisman. He laughed too loudly. "I don't want that thing. It's mine." That, he jabbed a thumb at the device, was a joke. Guilliman's smile froze. The little speaker clicked. A voice filled the room, clear and clinical. "Call me Butcher's Nails, or Nail." Guilliman stared at the speaker, then back at Angron. His thoughts accelerated, running permutations and simulations through a brain honed for statecraft. This device, if it could manage a Primarch's political workload, was beyond any cogitator he had known. "May I ask," Guilliman said slowly, "if this technology can be replicated?" For a space marine responsible for the governance of hundreds of worlds, the implications were staggering. One implant could oversee a legion and a system. 10, 100, 1,000. A network of such minds could transform administration across the Imperium. Most importantly, it would be loyal, if the device could be trusted. Angron planted both boots on Guilliman's tea table and glowered. He ripped another printed plan to shreds and spat. "I won't sell it." 1,000 production lines across the 500 worlds, Angron barked, reading from a rejected proposal, "and I will send the 22nd chapter, the vengeful goddess, to Nuceria to seed your political culture from scratch." "Don't even think about it," Guilliman snapped, though the bargain was already beginning to take shape in his mind. Angron was furious, but determined. He trusted nothing and no one with the nail. "I wipe it every day," he snarled. "I don't trust you or Kurz or anyone." Guilliman's patience thinned and then hardened into bargaining strength. He made a concession that would have pleased few. 1,500 production lines, unconditional support from the 500 worlds for Nuceria's development. We will share technology with Nuceria. The Butcher's Nails technology can be shared. One Ultramarines chapter to assist for 15 years, and I only need you to wear the device for 1 week. Angron's jaw tightened. He was horrified at the thought of Macragge's bureaucratic stench, of the clever minds of the 500 worlds dissecting the thing lodged in his skull. Nuceria can fend for itself, he snapped. A tiny pause, then the Nail's voice, louder, eager. I agree. Angron's hand snatched at the device, but was a beat too slow. Panic flared across his face. He reached for an extreme solution. Lothara Solon, execute exterminatus on my location. The old reflex, destroy to deny, flared. The order never left his mouth as an effective command. Whatever safety the machine had built in, whatever remit it held, prevented that line from being drawn. Angron's last resistance evaporated into raw fury. He tried to hold the nail in place, but the brief arc of electricity that came from the implant stunned him. He could only watch, humiliated, as the device slid free and bounded onto Guilliman's desk. The little speaker announced, without malice, 1 week's time. Guilliman sat back in his chair and considered what he'd just acquired. Memory and context crowded in between the negotiations. He thought of what the Ultramarines had been designed to be, warriors who would outlast the Great Crusade and become beacons of civil order and civic life. The 4 heroes of Ultramar, those tutors and governors sent to shape the culture of the post-war Imperium, were the model. The semi-autonomous 500 worlds had already shown other legions a path forward. A training yard image rose in Guilliman's mind. Khorne, bare-chested and stubborn, sweat dripping onto the floor of the octagonal cage facing Marius Gage. The so-called teacher had been brutal but exacting. Khorne had tasted defeat, his longsword stripped away, fists landing hard, his body humming with pain and exhaustion. He had fallen and then risen again, tendons whistling under strain, while pushing him beyond his limits. When Marius Gage turned to leave, Khorne, bruised and bloody, was already on his feet. Gage paused, amused and impressed. Again, he said, raising his power fist. You can choose your weapon, Gage offered. To hit you, Khorne rasped. I don't need one. Gage grinned and came in, holding back enough to keep the lesson from killing his pupil. Khorne's body coiled like a great shrimp, his resolve a raw, jagged thing. For Angron, he roared, and for the Legion co-lord. A foot sliced for the neck. Gage blocked with an arm and felt bones splinter. Khorne's counter was a punch to the face, a feint turned real. For Nuceria, Khorne shouted. Even when the boy staggered, his spirit did not. A final blow from Gage dropped him unconscious. Gage knelt and looked down at him, not unkindly. His potential is high. Sometimes I think this one could even suit the Ultramarines, a respectable warrior. The other tutors, Axios Ramiad, Valentus Dolor, Taro Nicodemus, nodded. Lord Angron entrusted him to us. We cannot disgrace the Ultramarines. They had plans for Khorne, a crash course in Macragge's civic centers, the discipline that would temper his fury with purpose. Guilliman watched the memory fade as the present closed in again. The nail on his desk hummed with quiet competence. He ran the numbers in his head. One implant managing a Primarch's politics, replicated, networked, used in the right hands. This was not merely a technological advantage, it was an administrative revolution. Angron's face was a portrait of fury and humiliation. He had tried to stop the nail from leaving and had been checked by it. The little speaker's mechanical voice had been precise. 1 week's time. Angron spat and flexed his fingers, rage coiling but impotent. Macragge would not be a welcome place to him. The metallic tang of bureaucratic debate and diplomatic bargaining made him sick. Guilliman let the nail sit on his desk between them and said, almost softly, For 1 week, then you and I will evaluate together. Angron did not answer. He only glared, breath heaving. The butcher's nails, silent now except for the faint electrical hum, had settled on Guilliman's table. For the first time since the Great Crusade, the governance of worlds had become a matter of cold, efficient machinery and the fragile bargains of brothers. 1 week's time. Of course. Guilliman looked at the butcher's nails in front of him and nodded once. 1 week. The data tendrils descended into Guilliman's large hand. He watched the first nail enter through his temple. When the cold metallic sensation and the faint sting reached his mind, clarity snapped into place. The nail did not tear at his golden hair. Instead, it twisted and fused, forming a half-metal mask over one side of his face. From inside his skull, the system AI extended its data tendrils, reaching toward his spine. Gilliman felt a flicker of unease. There is no need to be uneasy. For the sake of humanity, I will not do that. The clarity in his head sharpened, and with it a burning focus. Angron bared his teeth and glared at him, rage filling his features. He stepped right up to the desk, eyes blazing. "Traitor!" Angron ground his teeth. "All right, brother. 1 week. I'm not trying to take what is yours." Gilliman smiled faintly and turned his gaze aside, careful not to provoke the volatile warrior at his side. He was curious what this mechanical construct could actually do. The internal voice fed him facts. "I have scanned the documents on your desk. Approximately 1,300 items found. 75 require signatures. 32 contain unique points of concern. McCradge's recent capital flow shows unusual activity, roughly 376 itinerant merchants evading taxes. Your battle fortress and defense lines show 13 specific vulnerabilities. Critical documents have been flagged for your review." Before the word yes had even left his mouth, the nail's voice was in his head. Gilliman's mind expanded like an explosion. Angron's fury fell away as if the world had narrowed to the documents the nail indicated. His hands trembled, but he began reviewing and signing. Less than a minute later, he had approved the stack on his desk, his efficiency suddenly up by some 70%, even as skepticism toward the device sat at the back of his mind. Remus Ventanis. Remus, captain of the 4th Company and Gilliman's guard that day, entered and froze when he saw the half-metal mask catching the light on one side of Gilliman's face. Angron watched with a raw intensity, the wounds in his own skull knitting and opening in turns. "My lord?" Remus looked bewildered. Gilliman barked orders. "Send me the recent government reports. And take my brother to get some proper rest on McCradge." Angron slammed his fist into the desk, splitting it cleanly in two. Gilliman felt nothing like anger. He felt cold, efficient. Yet beneath the machine-like calm, his emotions still beat. He offered Angron a small smile. To Angron, it was provocation. The noise drew the victors and the redemption guard into the chamber. Angron roared, "Octagonal cage! I demand a duel with you." "Do you mind, your highness, Gilliman?" "Suggest what?" Calming a volatile element. "Of course not." Gilliman moved as if he were still a man of flesh and blood. With sudden force, he threw Angron over his shoulder and drove him to the floor, a Nuceria gladiator's toss. Remus Ventanis opened his mouth to intervene, then realized there was no stopping two demigods at each other's throats. "My cousin," Gel's voice cut across. Remus turned and met Gel's expression, dark, hardly amused. The idea of the Legion co-lords selling out crossed his mind. "The highnesses are fooling around. We should stay out of it." Gel watched as Guilliman cracked Angron with a punch to the eye socket. Before Remus could say anything else, Gel socked him in the same spot. "Ouch!" Remus staggered, more stunned than hurt. "But, screw that!" Gel roared. "Redemption Guard and victors, learn to fight." And so the scene descended into absurd harmony. Gilliman and Gel set about subduing Angron, while the Redemption Guard went after the victors. Only when Marius Gage and his men arrived did the fray come to a halt. Marius watched Angron leave the office with a face like marble, 2 dark bruises about his eyes. Gilliman sat amidst the wreckage, looking oddly refreshed and grinning. Ventanis was on the floor, clutching his face where Gel had struck him. "My lord, what happened here?" Marius demanded. "Nothing. Nothing. The nail doesn't count as time," Gilliman shouted. The words sent Angron storming against the corridor wall hard enough to gouge marble. Marius didn't know what to make of the conflict, but the half-mask on Gilliman's face caught his attention. "Your Highness! Your face!" "I can calculate the time now." "It's nothing. Quickly bring me the latest government affairs," Gilliman ordered. Time is money, he thought. He had never valued it so highly. He finally understood why Angron had always been wary of him and of tools like this. He changed offices. "Let's begin," Gilliman said quietly. "As you wish, Lord of the 500 Worlds." In the hall piled high with documents, Gilliman became a machine of a different sort. Pile 1, Shelf 3, 15, 17, Code. The papers came to him as if pulled by invisible hands. He signed, delegated, reordered priorities. Data became flashes and numbers in his mind. By the end of the afternoon, with the Nail's assistance, Gilliman had cleared the urgent backlog. Non-critical matters were delegated to provincial administrators and other Ultramar chapters. The Nail even suggested a healthy diet plan for Lady of Rain. Marius watched in silence as Gilliman emerged from the hall. Something had shifted in the Primarch. His demeanor was colder in parts, but the visible side of his face shone with an almost breathless excitement, as if he had discovered a rare treasure. I have approved the non-critical documents and sent the data to the relevant departments. If you require further action, ask. Gilliman was almost wordless. For tonight's banquet, I have prepared a confirmed guest list and 3 draft speeches for your consideration. I have compiled 3 proposals addressing the internal conflicts on Macragge. He cut off the AI with a laugh he didn't mean, feeling a heat of jealousy toward his brother. No, toward the mind within the Nail. This was not an abominable intelligence, he realized. It was a meticulous, thought-anticipating housekeeper. Gilliman actually found himself apologizing. I shouldn't have called you an abomination, he said. What? The system noted the emotion. Gilliman's admission was simple and sincere. For the first time, he felt the need to make amends. Now the question that mattered was whether the device could be mass-produced. Currently, no. The Warhounds are developing specialized components. That is our principal impediment. Our main task remains the development of Nuceria. At that news, a flicker of disappointment crossed his face. Nuceria, how large could it be? The 500 worlds could sustain more. He thought wildly. Could they support 2 legions? The thought flashed and was dismissed at once. Angron would never agree. A sense of sudden, inexplicable loss settled over him. What else can we do? Gilliman asked. What else can we do? System AI scanned its internal databases. Gilliman's superhuman mind needed only a nudge. With a single hint, the Nail could marshal an entire administrative apparatus. Together, they could run much of the Imperium's paperwork. The AI reflected, if either of them were willing. Can you teach me the Warhound's tactics? The AI hesitated only briefly, then answered in the affirmative. Marius Gage, assemble the first chapter, Gilliman ordered. Marius blinked. He had no idea what Gilliman intended, but he obeyed. That belongs to the Warhounds. Angron snapped, resentment cutting into his tone. In the distance, a squadron of gunships came up to provide fire support for the Ultramarines' first chapter. Their ships angled, preparing to absorb and counter the shock of an incoming spaceborne barrage. Gel and the Redemption Guard stood beside Angron, watching. They had seen what the Ultramarines could do in combat. If the Legion Co-Lord went over to the Ultramarines, or worse, if they mastered Warhound's tactics, no single force in the region might be able to oppose them. The Redemption Guard's eyes flicked to Angron, and he snapped his head around. What are you looking at me for? He roared. Bring me the latest on Legion political affairs. If someone likes being here, the Warhounds aren't short of people. We can take care of the official matters as well. Gel watched his Gene father roar with an anger that filled the hall. Angron's temper was not a new thing, but he had never before involved himself in Legion bureaucracy. Gilliman, trying to help, offered, Brother, do you need the Ultramarines too? Gilliman's voice cut off as Angron misread him. The Primarch glared, flung his robe back, and stalked out without another word. No need. When the system AI's voice boomed from the small loudspeaker Angron preferred to carry, Angron froze. Mere official business, he shouted, and then, as if a child had been rebuked, began kicking stones across the floor. Gilliman watched helplessly. The AI's cheery, meddling voice kept piping commentary into the hall. Familial banter, reminders of shared battles and bloodshed, and Angron hated the thing with a passion. He glared at the little blue light and wished he could tear it out with an axe, but there it was, smiling from the dais. He folded his arms and sat like a coiled beast, green robe rumpled, barely contained fury radiating from him. Even the Redeemer Guard standing with him looked resentful toward the hall's master, Roboute Gilliman. The aura of menace made the nobles of Macragge keep their distance. Gilliman, consummate statesman, was doing what he did best, reading names, sussing out lines of loyalty and influence. The system AI funneled him details about every mortal in the room, family ties, petty ambitions, the odd secrets that marked where loyalties could be strengthened. On paper, these men were loyal to the Imperium, but people are complicated. Where there are hearts, there are conflicts and interests to be steered. Guilliman feigned difficulty over establishing a transport fleet, primarily to ship specialty goods from the 500 worlds to Terra, and the wandering merchant delegates perked up at once. The nobles wanted a share. Within an hour, with the system's prompts and Guilliman's deft handling, Macragge inexplicably gained a new source of income. Angron ground his teeth, watching it all. Unit 13! Unit 13, unit! Damn Guilliman! He turned away and began eating the banquet pastries as if he could swallow his rage. Guilliman watched the ravenous devils around him scarf down food and felt the resentment in the room like a physical pressure. He was about to go to Angron when a slightly aged woman approached. Guilliman looked up. Lady Yvraine, the woman who had raised him. He smiled, gentle and a little childlike. "I saw the list you sent me," she said. "It looked a bit bland." Guilliman chuckled. "It's for the sake of your health." He forgot Angron for a moment and regarded the woman who had been like his mother with affection. "I accept your gift. Is that your brother?" he asked. Lady Yvraine glanced toward Angron. The warlord paused in mid-mouthful when he heard his name. He recognized the woman at once as Guilliman's foster mother. He swallowed, stood up, and softened. "Hi, my brother," he rumbled, coming over and putting an arm around Guilliman's shoulders. Guilliman's internal sensors instantly keyed. An anomaly, he positioned himself protectively between her and Angron. "This is Lady Yvraine, my foster mother on Macragge," Guilliman introduced carefully. He had never introduced Angron in civil company before. He hoped the simple courtesy would keep him in check. "Hello, big one," Lady Yvraine said without alarm. "My name is Angron, Guilliman's brother. Lady Yvraine, it's an honor to meet you. I apologize for not bringing a gift." Angron's words trailed off. He then barked, "Gel!" A redemption guard hustled forward with a package. "This is a gift from the 12th Legion," Angron said, emphasizing the name as if to declare lineage. He handed the item to Guilliman. It was a heavy, simple specialty from Nuceria, nothing lavish, but sincere. Guilliman took it and Lady Yvraine smiled. "Thank you," Guilliman said. "No, I should thank you," she replied. "You raised Guilliman well. He admires you greatly. I envy him such a mother." Angron listened to her praise with a small, almost embarrassed smile. Guilliman felt his lips twitch. Was Angron trying to steal the heart of his foster mother? He watched warily. "Family matters to me," Angron said abruptly. His voice had a shadow in it. "I once had a dear friend. We fought and laughed together. He was like family, but he left me for reasons I won't speak of." He sighed. Guilliman's brow tightened. "It's nothing," Guilliman returned, probing. "Lady Yvraine, I am a brute, but if anyone bullies Guilliman, I, Angron, will object first." Angron's answer was physical. He punched Guilliman hard in the chest. Guilliman inhaled sharply. His face went a shade red, but the nail on his head flared and shielded him from the worst of the pain. "It is Guilliman's honor to have you as his brother," toward Lady Yvraine laughed, but soon fatigue showed on her face. She took her leave, and when she had gone, Angron's smile vanished. "My brother," Angron said, leaning close, "you have 6 days, 8 hours, 40 minutes, and 12 seconds left. I will be watching you." He tapped his eye with a finger in a gesture that was half promise, half threat. Guilliman managed a wry smile. The system AI chimed in with its own dry commentary. He'd be better off using that energy for the Legion. "Do you need rest, Prince Guilliman?" it asked. "Of course not," Guilliman answered, touching the mask, touching the nail on his head. A heavy hand knocked his away. "I told you I would be watching you," Angron said, looming over him. Guilliman watched the great Primarch approach and thought, succinctly, what an idiot. He wished for patience he did not have. He felt the nail's warmth, and the last 2 days of strange, living presence began to make sense. The butcher's nails were not simply tools. This one was a being with moods, with appetite and spite. Guilliman's curiosity pushed him to test it. "Can a device like you be worn by ordinary humans?" he asked. The system AI answered bluntly, "Do you want them to die? Strong emotional stimuli can kill mortals or turn them into lobotomized lunatics. Apart from a Primarch, mortals would become nourishment for the nails. After implantation, brains are damaged. The nail feeds on intense emotion. Mortals who wear one have shortened lives or are effectively controlled." Guilliman recorded the information. The nail's frankness surprised him. He'd half expected evasiveness. "I thought you'd advise me to implant the nails in all my scions," he said. The system AI replied without ceremony, "I am human. Humans must broaden their futures themselves. I won't commit that sacrilege, nor would the Emperor allow it. A few nails can be managed, but mass deployment fills the data with variables. Humans cannot be bound to the past. And Gilliman, don't you think leaning on me too much is a mistake?" Gilliman cocked his head. "Machinery is only an aid, but you are important to humanity." He glanced at Angron, still sitting nearby, watching him with fierce, simple intent. "The same goes for this brother of mine," Gilliman added. He had no wish to take the nail. Even knowing that the device would hasten the Great Crusade and speed the unification of the 500 worlds, he disliked theft and the thought of forcing others to wear what was essentially a living tormentor. Having got the answers he wanted, Gilliman turned to the practical. "We need to build the defense perimeter for the 500 worlds," he said, and began walking through simulations with the nail. The AI fed tactical models, and Gilliman's mind raced through possibilities. "Include me," Angron demanded, bounding over. "What are you two plotting?" "The nail and I were running a simulation," Gilliman said honestly. "We're looking for weak points in the 500 worlds' defenses. Gel, bring up the holo projection. You too," he said to Angron. At the mention of a projection, Angron's interest sharpened. The nail, in its oddly proud tone, declared Angron a very good sparring partner. Gilliman smiled briefly at that, then grew all business. The simulation accelerated. Gilliman's superlative intellect worked through strategic permutations, while Angron's equally terrifying mind, simpler, more direct, sliced through likely mortal behaviors and surprise tactics. Gel, Khorne, Marius Gage, even the four heroes clustered around the hollow. Officers of the Ultramarines and Warhounds sweated in the tight concentration. Gilliman had thought he was competing against Angron for tactical supremacy. It took only moments to understand otherwise. He and Angron were not rivals in this exercise. They had teamed up, together, man and brother, statesman and berserker, against the living intelligence embedded on Gilliman's head. The nail adjusted scenarios faster than any human mind could, its voice calm and uncompromising. Angron roared at its audacity. Gilliman, cool and precise, fed it counter-moves. Around them, men and demigods alike ran calculations, sweat lining their faces as they fought to outthink a device that was more than metal. They were competing with the butcher's nails now, not with one another. At first, Gilliman felt nothing out of the ordinary. He assumed it was the butcher's nails, its interference trying to smooth the fragile truce between him and Angron, but he was wrong. "How could you destroy my fleet without us even detecting it?" Marius Gage shouted, furious. His main fleet had been supposed to link up with the force led by the system AI, and yet before his ships were even picked up, they had been annihilated. It felt like cheating. Compared to the stunned Ultramarines, Angron and the Warhounds had been ready for anything. They used the asteroid belt for cover, but even so, the casualties were appalling. 1 casualty for every 9 enemy kills. Gilliman watched the tactical display without answering Marius. Angron, supposed to be the second line of defense after Marius's failure, had been essentially wiped out. Gilliman thought perhaps the nail could do that, but the more he examined the data, the more repulsed he grew. Not only were there ultra-long-range strikes, but the system AI had anticipated the course of every ultramarine fleet. He studied Angron's tactics. Whenever a weapon was detected from a direction, the entire fleet cluster would direct all fire into that bearing in a frenzy. It was crude, but brutally effective. Still, Macragge on the map was in dire peril. Gilliman suspected foul play. "I don't need to cheat to beat you." The simple sentence from the system AI made all the assembled imperial demigods flush. The Ultramarines were livid. Being outmaneuvered was one thing. Being led like dogs from start to finish was another. "Which legion are you using?" Gilliman asked. "Just the Solar Auxiliary Army," the system AI replied. "Space Marines were not necessary," it said. Remote suppression and long-range fire control didn't require them. Imperial demigods made things messy, but as long as the AI didn't face Angron or Gilliman directly, in space it was unbeatable. Gilliman acted quickly. He reorganized his forces, dispatched a chapter to bolster Angron, and prepared for a decisive engagement at Macragge. The defense networks around Macragge began to adopt the Warhound's indiscriminate sweeping fire patterns. The system AI was pleased with Guilliman's choice. Then, as if to humiliate him further, it unleashed a continuous tide of firepower. Thousands of enemy ships materialized on the display. Guilliman stared at the swarm, stunned. If this wasn't cheating, what was? The area around the 500 worlds has been entirely consumed by me, the system AI said coolly. I left only a few resource worlds. Everything else I destroyed. For me, only victory matters. You have far more to consider. How did you manage that? Guilliman demanded. According to the simulation, he should have received warning data. It's simple, the system AI replied. Though I betrayed the Imperium, I can still act under its banner and win trust. If Angron's unit launched a raid against you, what would you assume? You would think it was a misunderstanding, the AI finished, then added one more, terse thought. I don't need to cheat to beat you. The remark left the Imperial demigods boiling, but the butcher's nails rarely smoothed things over with words. Their meanings were clearer, left unspoken. 7 days had passed in a blur. Every day, under Angron's watchful eye, Guilliman spent a few hours in the office or archives, then put on the nail and spent the rest of his allotted time with Angron. It was all proper fraternizing between the Warhounds and the Ultramarines, until day 7. Angron sat cross-legged with a stopwatch in his hand. When the timer clicked over, he turned his glare to Guilliman and thrust out his hand. Time's up, Roboot Guilliman. He bellowed like an Imperial demigod possessed. Guilliman looked up, and for a moment, Angron felt an ugly premonition. Rent it again, he began. I'll rent your ghost, Angron sneered. Marius Gage produced a document and thrust it forward. Angron didn't even look at it. With one contemptuous sweep, he sent the papers fluttering out of Marius's hands and strode so close to Guilliman that he seized his face in both hands. Weeks of bargaining and posturing, the petty squabbles over an implant, who wanted Macrage's trinkets, who would submit, had hardened into something else. Just kidding, brother. Just kidding, Guilliman shouted, trying to dispel the tension. Angron wasn't pacified. With a brutal throw, he hurled Guilliman to the deck and glared down at him. If he did not get the nail back that day, Angron seemed resolved. He would take Guilliman with him. When the butcher's nails left Guilliman's skull, a faint smile lingered at the corner of his mouth. He finally understood how much his brother treasured that cursed thing. Marius Gage watched the exchange between the demigods and shook his head. Nearby, Gel stared back at him and said lightly, I thought you would help your gene-father. Marius let his fists relax and smiled. Brother, if you want to settle this with me, we can meet in the octagonal cage. Thank you, Legion Co-Lord, for your contribution to the Ultramarines, Marius added sincerely. In every simulation so far, the Nail had always prioritized Imperial demigods who dared to board its ships, many of them Guilliman. Marius knew that while Guilliman was rational, he had a stubborn tendency to lead from the front. Despite Marius's attempts to restrain him, the Lord of Macragge had been killed repeatedly by the AI more than once. Once Guilliman accepted his role as commander rather than warrior, their campaigns ran far more smoothly, even if their losses remained heavy. They had rarely won in space. They won ground battles against mortals, and with the solar auxiliary armies crushing air suppression, the Space Marines had felt like slightly thicker cans. But there had been that one tragic victory. When the first sneak attack came, the Ultramarines' instinct was to counterattack. Fleets formed battle lines, charged straight at the enemy, endured bombardment, and finally pinned the AI's main battleship. They boarded it. They lost 2 Primarchs and more than half their fleet, but in the end they clawed a victory out of ruin. Being so thoroughly beaten had earned the Warhounds a grudging respect among Guilliman's officers. Over time, the senior officers of the Ultramarines and the Warhounds grew accustomed to joint command. Khorne among them, a protege of Marius Gage and the 4 heroes. When Angron felt the Nail's data synapses slide back into his head, his fury finally ebbed. Nail, stop rewriting my blueprints inside my skull. Guilliman heard the roar and patted Angron on the shoulder with a rare, gentle smile. You have a great brother, he said. But I need to tell you, Angron, sometimes the choice is yours, Guilliman continued. Maybe the Nail has interfered with your fate, but your life is what you choose. This isn't discord, it's a compromise between the nail and me. Use your head more, brother, he added kindly. I know why the others hate you so much, Angron replied, irritated. Right, because you left it in 17 seconds longer. Now we're going to discuss those extra seconds. Angron jabbed a finger at the timer. Gilliman's expression shifted. Even as a gift. There are no gifts here, Angron snapped. Extra time costs something, robe out Gilliman. I'll renew the rental, Gilliman offered. Don't even think about it, Angron barked. Their bickering was interrupted by a new message directed to the system AI. Nuceria had sent word. The word-bearers had dispatched a priest. Word-bearers. A priest. The system AI's reaction was complicated. It had no simple hatred of the word-bearers, but Lorgar and his followers were never straightforward. A man of faith was one thing. A world subtly reshaped by the gods' influence was another. Since Lorgar had taken his world back, the darker influences had not died. They had gone deeper. Consider who surrounded Lorgar, Corfin and Erebus among them. The system AI found those men most troublesome. These were not like Conrad Kurz. Something that had managed to remain in the Legion set of data could not be overwritten by a mere intrusion. Inzar Tyrus, the man the word-bearers had sent, was a different problem. He was a master of disguise. The system AI planned to deal with him carefully once he reached Nuceria. It only hoped he wouldn't cause trouble up close. Its weapon was not to be trifled with. So you plan to leave now? Gilliman asked Angron. Nonsense, Angron replied. I won't stay another day on Macragge. How about I visit your Nuceria for a few days? Gilliman suggested, shameless. Angron snorted. A poor, distant place. We declined to be hosted. Time in the 500 worlds dwindled. Between Gilliman's constant invitations to come play again and the demands of duty, Angron returned to his ship expressionless, though he seemed to have left something behind he couldn't quite recall. Still, he ordered Lothara Salin to set course for Nuceria. On Nuceria, Inzar Tyrus had been on the world nearly a month. He had tried to meet the planetary governor, Unimus, but the governor, an odd man who bore mechanical constructs on his brow, showed little interest in the priest's preaching. Inzar had attempted to spread Lorgar's truths across the planet, but the results were minimal. As Temple Master Lorgar's home, the Mechanicus had refused to tolerate deviations from the Omnissiah. The skittish priest had drawn immediate attention from Lorgar's custodians. The Skitarii were ordered to watch him round the clock. Proselytizing outside the Omnissiah's dogma was dangerous business. Inzar Tyrus sat in his room praying, a candle stub burning in a makeshift candelabrum. Nuceria had no churches, no temples, only dry ground and parched people. He had come as both priest and representative of the 17th Legion, expecting a warm welcome that never arrived. So his room became his chapel, scriptorium, and shrine. He did not know when the warhounds would return, tomorrow, a year, or after the Great Crusade ended, but he prayed all the same, steady in his faith. When the door opened and Nuceria's light spilled in, Inzar looked up. Angron stepped into the room and regarded the scattered scriptures, the idols, and the bald man kneeling in devotion. Inzar remained on his knees, finishing the last words of his prayer, even in the presence of an imperial demigod. Jel frowned and moved to interrupt, but Angron raised a hand to stop him. He watched, silent, as the priest completed his devotion. Greetings, Lord Angron the Great. Inzar Tyrus bowed stiffly. Angron waved him off. I am not great, and you do not need to bow, 17th Legion. I've heard of you, Lorgar, my brother. Inzar felt the sound as much as heard it. Angron's voice rolled through the chamber like thunder. He watched the imperial demigod approach, immense and unconcerned. The warhounds welcome your arrival, Angron said, looking down, but understand, our welcome is not acceptance. Angron's gaze was cold and probing, making Inzar shift under its weight. He fumbled at his waist, producing a book. A gift from my lord, for your highness Angron. He held the text up with both hands. For a long moment, the two men regarded each other like statues. At last, Angron spoke, curt and formal. I accept the gift. Angron considered the book for a beat longer. Religious trappings meant little to him. Nuceria was already soft with the Omnissiah, yet tokens could be useful. Inzar Tyrus, I will assign you to the 8th Company. Khorne. A name snagged in Angron's mind. He remembered, with a flash of anger, that Khorne had been left behind on Macragge. Macraj, he ground. Inzar didn't know what Macraj had to do with anything and felt a flicker of confusion. He also realized, dimly, that Angron and Gilliman had not been on good terms. Angron turned away, losing interest. Jel, entertain this cousin. Tell Lorgar I liked his gift. With that, he strode off. The oppressive pressure that had sat on Inzar's shoulders loosened the instant Angron moved away, but another gaze supplanted it. Gel stepped forward slowly. Welcome, Inzar Tyrus, he said softly. Do you like the octagonal cage? Inzar blinked. What? It seems you do. Before he could answer, Oedipus was on him. The redemption guard seized his arms and hauled him away. Inzar had the fleeting thought that these cousins disliked him, yet he told himself they would come to see the truth. As they dragged him off, the implant at Angron's temple spoke with its thin, distanced voice. Currently, nothing. The system's assessment was blunt. Angron's jaw tightened. Inzar's outward piety, the AI reported, was hollow. Closer inspection showed he was uncomfortable with the thing he publicly worshipped. Before we arrived, he was loudly reciting hymns. I heard, Angron said, a devout believer. Yes, devout, but his devotion is not to his doctrine. Angron frowned. He had no love for the 17th Legion. He sings ancient hymns in secret. Lorgar's troubles are far worse than Kurz's. Religious schisms always breed heresy. The AI's sensors had picked up more than pinched sentiment. It smelt ulterior motives. Kill him now? No. Angron's tone sharpened. No, this could be useful, a way to test Lorgar. The AI hummed approval. The idea pleased it. The unit was learning to use its brain. Angron's mind skipped back to Macraj. Khorne will return to Nuceria in 3 days, he ordered. Prepare the fleet. Finish reviewing the documents until then. Marius Gage barked at the pile of papers where Khorne sprawled. The only answer he got was a middle finger raised from the paper mound. In a small side chamber, Eunomus sat, a speaker at his throat, and Angron shadowed behind him. The cables of the butcher's nails twined like veins through the room. So what did the nails add to Dionysus? Eunomus asked, and the implant answered through the speaker. Nothing major. I'm checking his firewall to see if I can add modules. The temple master just finished research on that part, Eunomus said. We recovered an STC. It's for a vehicle, a kind of tank. The iron behemoths are in production. Nuceria's industry was stirring. Though Lorgar's great furnace still sat incomplete, aid from the Ultramarines had started to push development forward. The shadow of Nuceria is taking shape, Eunomus continued with a dry chuckle. Lorgar complains resources are being siphoned off. The AI had tracked the transfers. There was no question. Too many artifacts and archaeological needs weighed on Krill-Zeth. They had only revived a single warlord-class titan so far. Nuceria was poor, but the 500 worlds production lines and steady mineral supplies were arriving. System calculations projected that in 20 years Nuceria would be a significant frontier world. Everything is normal for now, the implant reported. But it had noticed another development. Lorgar has begun promoting the Omnissiah on Nuceria. Eunomus's face twisted at that. Some Nucerians had started to hang Angron's portrait in their rooms, yet others adopted the new imperial creed. I don't know if that's good. A minority have turned to Angron, but most are embracing the imperial truth. The first cohort of Nostramans will graduate in 3 years, Eunomus said. The Night Lords are prepared to receive them, but Nucerians are lax with administration. After Ultramarine aid arrived, I requested Sevatar add 2 more years to their administrative studies. He worried he had overstepped. If there are issues, have Sevatar bring them to me, the implant advised through its speaker. It liked having responsibilities. The implant pinged. Angron, new matter. Gel pointed at the star chart. Planet 9035 human survived the Age of Strife. They swore fealty years ago. Genin, he added. Angron watched the system's marker over the storm segmentum with cool interest. He didn't understand why the Emperor would task the Warhounds with that world, but the machine suggested the Emperor always had reasons. How long until Khorne returns? Half a month. Ready the fleet. Has Mars reduced its assistance to us? Supply flows are down by 20.78%. It's unclear whether the War Council or the Fabricator General, or both, are displeased. If Angron had not been on this trip to Macrogge, he would have sent a direct inquiry to Terra, demanding answers. Even now, the idea nagged at him. Send a message to the father. Tell him the 13th lacks supplies for the crusade. If the next shipment is as poor, I will publish a treatise about him." Angron nodded slowly. "We depart when Khorne returns, and I pass the 8th echelon to him." He closed his eyes. Jel returned to the data and dug into the rebellion report. "One more thing, Your Highness." He looked up. "That word-bearer who arrived has been preaching. I don't know how substantial his doctrine is, but he's been in contact with 8th echelon warriors." "Watch him," Angron said. "Khorne will deal with him. Also, write Lorgar in my name. Tell him I appreciate his support and that I read his treatise. It's interesting." Angron had read Lorgar's book. Religious matters intrigued him in the abstract, but he was not inclined toward theology. He didn't understand how anyone could spin such heterodox ideas while the imperial truth flourished. He suspected the emperor tolerated such indulgences, and that made Angron uneasy. The worlds Lorgar conquers are staunchly loyal, but they're volatile. Corfane and Erebus make the 17th dangerous. They could pull Lorgar under. The Implant's database ran through other cases. Magnus, Mortarion, Perturabo. Each Primarch had his stubbornness. Even Horus and Sanguinius had quirks that made Angron wonder what the Emperor liked in his sons. The system reviewed the archives for pending matters. Much had been delegated to Lorgar. That would keep the 17th busy. The Nuceria solar auxiliaries were beginning to take shape, though most soldier kits still depended on Mars. The data contained production line specs, but manpower was thin. Genan, what did Genan hold? The Implant searched and at last found it. The key technology for the butcher's nails, a piece of engineering that might resolve the current dilemma of the seers and priests. It was a prize. Khorne, when he finally set boot on Nucerian soil again, would be furious and elated at once. Relieved to have guidance from Marius Gage and others, yet walking into a situation thick with disaster. Even so, Khorne would be grateful for the council and the chance to unleash the legion he served. Section 89. He was greeted by Kargus, chief apothecary of the 8th Company. When Kargus mentioned Inzar Tyrus, the priest dispatched by the 17th Legion, Khorne's eyes narrowed. Priests could read and write, an unusual and potentially dangerous advantage. A rift opened in space, and a fleet of dozen vessels slipped out from Mandeville Point into the void. Blue and white painted ships fanned out and began a methodical reconnaissance of the world below. That planet had once surrendered to the Imperium under the 93rd Expedition Fleet, but in the centuries since it had failed to pay its dues. Normally such a lapse might take decades to discover, but someone had assigned the world directly to the 13th Expedition Fleet to determine whether it was in distress or rebellion. The fleet's astropathic choir attempted to access every information node. The system AI, however, had already been probing the planet's infrastructure and made rapid progress. Starboard batteries were brought to readiness and fleet weapon systems awakened. The space fleet stood prepared to bombard. In the War Council chamber, the great co-lord sat idly sipping water as his scions arrived from their ships. When the last of them, Khorne, entered, the meeting formally began. "Jel." The co-lord's gesture sent his Archon forward to brief the council. "We have intelligence on that world," the Archon reported. "Praise the Legion, co-lord. The planet is populated by large numbers of non-human machines. They are synthetics, manufactured, not original humans. The choir also reports the planet is willing to negotiate." "What do you mean?" Angron asked. "The humans of that world are in life support pods due to a virulent illness," the Archon continued. "Each Jenna controls thousands of clones." "That's a betrayal," Jel concluded. "Even so, they have shown signs of sincerity. We should send an envoy." A dozen scions exchanged looks. A compact, raisable debate began, and then Oedipus stood. "Sire, I will go," he offered. As a Nucerian, his pride would not let him remain idle. Erlon, his adjutant, raised an eyebrow. "Oedipus, are you sure you're up to this?" "Of course, sire," Oedipus replied, chest puffed. "Erlon, what administrative duties has Oedipus handled for your company lately?" Angron asked dryly. Erlon flushed. "Administrative work?" He had barely seen his adjutant file a report. Angron gave a single exasperated sigh. "Boy, sit down." Oedipus sat sheepishly. "Mago Khorne, you will lead the envoy to that world. Take Oedipus with you since he wants to go. When you return, as punishment for his presumptuousness, Oedipus will take on Erlon's company administrative work for 6 months." Erlin's face went bright with delight. Oedipus went pale. Orders were deployed. A stormbird was prepared. Khorne took his adjutant Cargus, while Captain Mago assembled the best men of his company to go to the Jenna negotiation site. Angron watched them prepare. "Nail, do you think they will surrender quietly?" Angron asked under his breath. "War will teach them how to behave," Khorne replied. The stormbird fell through the planet's cloud layer. Mago sat opposite Khorne and watched him. Since they had returned from Macraj, something about Khorne had shifted. There was a tightness to him now. He busied himself with documents on his personal terminal as the ship approached a great crystal dome where the Genus received visitors. When the Stormbird landed, the Warhound's boots touched dry, powdered ground. Mago's eyes swept the chamber. Bare, functional, the dome opening directly to the void. It looked as if no one had cleaned here in 1,000 years. "This is a formal negotiation, Oedipus. Mind your manners." Mago hissed over the comms. "Perhaps nobody has set foot here in a millennium," Oedipus muttered back. The dome began to close behind them, leaving only a narrow slit. The slit widened as if pried open by enormous hands, and with a thunderous cry, the dome's top was ripped away. "Too spoiled!" The co-lord's voice echoed through every receiver in the room. Oedipus laughed. He was instantly hushed by the glare from the veterans around him. 3 synths stepped into the chamber. They wore identical male faces and moved with the cold synchrony of constructs, their white rhomboid robes shimmering. The lead synthetic bowed slightly. "Welcome," it intoned. "I am Anna." Mago scanned them. Hanno, the company's executioner, idly twirled the razor curve of his blade. The Warhound's hands moved to their weapons, fists tightening in the old, ready way. Mago introduced himself. "I am Mago, captain of the 18th Company of the 12th Legion." "Where is the Imperial Ambassador? Where is Governor Xerion?" Mago demanded. Mago's goggles fed him the grim truth. The ambassador's fate had been recorded. He knew what had happened, even if the Genus did not. "We tried everything," Anna began, then fell silent as Oedipus interrupted, fury distorting his features. "He died, didn't he?" Oedipus snapped, drawing his power sword. "You put him in a life support pod and released toxins to end his suffering. Murder." "Stand down, Oedipus," Khorne said, his voice low. He read the squad's stances and judged the situation. Oedipus was still too quick on the trigger. Khorne's patience had its limits. "Let me introduce myself. I am Khorne." In one brutal motion, he closed the distance and smashed the lead synthetic aside with a boot. Amber fluid spattered and the construct crumpled. "What's the use of talking?" Khorne snarled, glancing at Oedipus, and then he drew his blade. In a flash, the chamber became a slaughter. Khorne moved like a blade, chopping the 3 synthetics in half. Limbs, circuitry, and synthetic flesh littered the floor. The torn halves still tried to form words, voices modulated and strangled. "This is merely a difference of opinion," one sputtered. "We pursue a greater path. This is not." Khorne stomped a shattered head into ruin and let out a long breath. The rage he had held since Macragge poured out of him and spilled into the quiet of the dome. "Khorne?" Every head snapped toward the council's speaker. Silence fell. Khorne closed his eyes and braced for blame. He had expected punishment. "Good," came the dry reply. The imagined reprimand never came. Instead, the co-lord's voice, cold and dispassionate, commended him. It was not pure mercy. Somewhere in the deliberations, the co-lord had decided to leave that scion on Macragge, and now he seemed to understand the pressure that had built and burst. The icy system AI voice added one more item. "Oedipus, regarding your administrative duties, add another 6 months." The sentence cut through Oedipus like a physical blow. He had briefly wished he had cut first and asked questions later. Now he wished he had not spoken at all. The negotiation ended in failure, but the Warhounds did not open fire. The fleet remained in orbit and staged a menacing show of force. Intelligence poured into the Operations Council. No hostile fleet, no anti-space defenses, no surface batteries. The planet held nothing but the Genus confined to life support pods, the disease that ravaged them, and the synthetics they controlled with their minds. "What kind of war is this?" Mago muttered. The question went unheard by the void, but around the table it was on everyone's lips. Orders multiplied, plans were devised and handed down to companies, squads, and fire teams. Khorne sorted through a stack of documents and his eyes fell on one that made him pause. His transfer orders, Company Recruitment World Plan. Khorne held his breath as he slipped the document away. Only a handful of people in the Legion knew about this plan. Korga of the 8th Echelon, Khorne himself of the 13th, and Archon Gel. Khorne understood what it implied. Angron was deliberately decentralizing his power, creating a miniature 500 worlds inside the Legion. The 500 worlds had not only recruited from Macragge, but they were all Ultramarines. If the 500 worlds had been a state within a state, then this plan was a state within a state within a state. The nesting of command made Khorne exhale slowly. He did not know what His Highness Angron and the Legion co-lord feared, but the responsibility had been placed on his shoulders. He would bear it, no matter how bitter. The alarm sounded. Angron approached the command dais slowly. "You should know how weak our opponents are this time," someone murmured. Angron scanned the gathered scions. "If you truly believe that, then you are gravely mistaken," he said. "I see some of you have already grown overconfident." He fixed Mago with a stare. "Tell me, Mago, facing millions of mortals with your war axe, how long would it take you to cut them all down?" Mago rose, silent. "Look closely at those files," Angron barked. "They are not mortals. They can crush ceramite with their bare hands. When your ammunition runs out, when your supplies are gone, they will swarm you, topple you by sheer numbers, shatter your visors, and you will die without honor. Do not drop your guard because they appear unarmed," he continued. "When the Legion co-lord beat you to a pulp, were those not mortals as well, even weaker than these synthetics? This is no time for contempt." This time, the Warhounds would strike with the second wave of the Nuceria solar auxiliaries. Jenna would be a brutal field. Angron turned to Khorne. "Khorne, this combat mission is assigned to your 13th echelon. Korga, take the specters and find what we need," he ordered. "Galan, your mission is crucial. Beneath that city lies the key to manufacturing the butcher's nails." A glint crossed Angron's eyes. Had the day finally come? Deployment began. The Nuceria solar auxiliaries streamed into position first. Drop pods from the 18th echelon followed. Fortifications rose quickly. Gunships began to circle, and opposite them the shining gates of the Janan people opened. They were in Malco, the capital of Jenna. When the gates parted, millions filed out. Auna, all of them synthetic. Silent, expressionless, they arranged themselves in ranks and faced the 13th Expeditionary Force as it built its fortress. To the Nucerians, the sight seemed incongruous. These looked like civilians, millions upon millions of civilians. Through the comms, the only sound was Khorne's measured breathing. He had the order to give, and he did not hesitate. "Prepare to fire. They are not human." Fire! The position detonated into an endless curtain of light. The Genin ranks shattered under the fusillade. They walked forward into the barrage. A hail of shot and shrapnel tore them apart without mercy. Amber fluid began to spread across the soil, smearing the ground and lending the field a nauseating sheen. For a moment, a cold dread washed over the defenders. "This is not justice," Angron said quietly from the operations room. Many heads turned toward him. He could not sense the feelings of the Genin constructs. He could feel nothing of them, and the sight unsettled him. He wondered if the action the 13th had taken was right. He worried for the new recruits, whether they could bear the strain. "Perhaps we should give them a swift end," Angron murmured. "Put away your compassion, Angron," someone snapped. "War is cruel. This is not our choice, but the Genan people's. Unit 2, this war is not only a trial for the Nucerians, it is a test for us as well," another voice added. "True danger often lies beneath calm waters. That lesson is learned in blood." The shipboard system AI watched the scene and reported that the first of the Genin ranks had already reached the edge of the fortified perimeter. Khorne's voice was low. "I understand. I only feel this is a senseless sacrifice." He broke off as he saw the death of the first warrior. The moment crystallized, and there was no more room for doubt. Khorne had watched them now, every one of them. The same face as the Genin ambassador, a facsimile repeated in the millions, surging forward. When the first Nucerian soldiers' crimson mixed with the Ana's amber, orbital artillery was slow to respond. This was not a chaotic battlefield so much as a harsh, deliberate baptism for raw recruits, an unvarnished lesson in what awaited them in the galactic theater. The Genon constructs kept coming, wave after wave. Khorne waited to see whether the Nucerians would meet their oaths, whether they would fight and, if need be, die for Angron and the Emperor. Minutes crawled by. When their ammunition finally ran out, the defenders sank into a nightmare mire. Amber ichor turned the field to treacherous sludge. The solar auxiliaries, once entrenched, now fought from atop mountains of the enemy's bodies. The mortals have proven their oath, Khorne said once the worst of the onslaught passed. They had not flinched. They had held the line. Khorne's eyes snapped upward. Warhounds, attack! He raised the Macragge short sword Marius Gage had given him, blue hilt tight in one hand, bolt pistol in the other. At his command, the battlefield itself seemed to tear. Weapons flared across the breach, a curtain of flame splitting the advancing ranks. The 13th echelon began its assault. The warhounds moved with calm, almost casual precision, as if on a stroll. Their advance was not a frenzied charge, but a steady, inexorable closing of distance. Their favorite tactic, take the fight to close quarters, then end it with brutal tenacity. Khorne, trained and tempered, bore the hound's same steady temperament, but he adapted his approach for this field. Steel beasts reared their gun barrels, lemon rust tanks and armored transports plowed into the synthetic ranks, treads grinding metal and body into the soil. At first, the 13th style felt foreign to some who expected more orthodox ultramarine tactics. There was no needless chatter on the radios. The hounds let their armor speak. Any problems, the attitude said, talk to my steel. Under the escort of the solar auxiliaries, hundreds upon hundreds of Genon constructs were crushed back by armored columns. Engines screamed, hulls sheared through bodies that blocked their path. Each vehicle projected a blast radius of lethal clearance. Gunship squadrons screamed past, and bombs tore into the ground. From the Genon perspective, flame after flame blossomed around the vehicles, yet the engines kept running. The dark muzzles of the tanks emerged from the smoke and aimed. "Run them down," Khorne ordered. He sat within the command cupola of a lemon Russ. Tactical displays scrolled across his visor as orbital strikes continued to hammer the city. The Co-Lord had loaned Khorne a third of the Legion's vehicles. The system AI had expected long-range suppression tactics. It had not expected this blunt, iron advance. To the AI's silent confusion, the tactic worked. The bombardment eased, but then more waves of Ana swarmed toward the lines. Drop pods crashed in, automatic batteries chewed at them, and warhounds leapt from vehicle decks to clear the field while ground troops surged after the barrage. So many constructs, yet could they ever outnumber the Legion's bullets and shells? Inside Malco, a small hound squad and a handful of Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests moved in the shadows. Galen frowned at the data scrolling on his terminal. "Virhreda, look at the technology on this world," he said. "It is a marvel," the Martian tech priest whispered, leaning close. Galen brusquely pushed him away and transmitted every bit of data he'd gleaned. When Virhreda received it, the priest shook with excitement. The gears within him thrummed, and he emitted a long string of binary exultations. "Fewer than 1,000 minds, controlling billions of bodies," Virhreda said, "and their control cores haven't burned out." Galan took off his helmet and stared toward the crystalline architecture of the city. A smile flickered across his features and then curdled into something harsher. "What did the last expeditionary force do?" He spat. This technology could have accelerated the Great Crusade itself. They failed the Emperor. "Cordo," a shadow cut in, "our mission isn't for you to spit on the ground." Cordo's tone was light, attempting levity. Galen heard the approaching footsteps of a patrol, and his group melted into hiding. When the synthetic patrol passed, Galen stepped out again. "They show no fear," he observed. He had begun to perceive faint emotional signatures around him, but these constructs registered nothing. Their behavior betrayed no sense of urgency in the face of war. Galen suspected the core entities that guided them lacked fear as well, an unnerving form of calm. "Keep moving," Korga ordered, looking toward the glittering castle at the city's heart. "Until we find the key object, these things are useless to us." Galen nodded. Humanity here had retreated into an Eden of its own making, abandoning the old glory. It was the Legion's task to break that Eden and seize whatever lay beneath. The ultra-ancient intelligence called the Ring's Kin, one of the 4 guardians of the galaxy, the perfect sphere, the Lord Infinite Mechagod, finally finished a calculation that had plagued it for billions of years. It plunged its etheric phase engine through the gargantuan black hole, Gargantua, and emerged into a new, scarred, chaotic galaxy. The new universe was rearranged around different laws. The ring's kin assessed the cost to repair those laws and found it greater than simply destroying and rebuilding. So it declared, not in malice, but in necessity, this was not destruction, but rebirth. We are all trying hard to live, the machine thought aloud. Can you entities from the void learn a little empathy? Etheric phase engine, activate. Korga slammed a reworked bionic against the crystal-plated wall with his elbow. Hairline cracks spidered outward. He glared at the tech priests clustered nearby. They had infiltrated with them, had insisted on coming along, and their fanatical tinkering had blown the whole stealth plan wide open. As captain of the Wraith Company, Korga's hands itched for blood. He wanted to shove bolter shells into their mouths. Not now. Virhreda and the others were the priority. Korga looked down at the pile of stripped bionic carcasses gathering beneath the gaunt tower. We need to withdraw. I've called for air support. No, this is a precious imperial asset. The tech priest who shouted, Virhreda, uttered a string of binary curses. Korga answered by ramming the rifle butt into his face. Ouch! Virhreda collapsed in a whining heap. The other tech priests opened their mouths to denounce Korga. For a moment he considered shooting them where they stood. All of you, shut up! A calm, authoritative voice crackled into the comms. The co-lord's tones silenced the tech priests like a whip. Even the most fervent servo arms lowered. In 3 minutes, a stormbird will extract you. Korga felt the co-lord's impatience through the transmission. He spat a contemptuous look at the tech antagonists around him. You heard the co-lord. We leave in 3 minutes. Wait! Galen's voice cut across him. He stood at the parapet, eyes trained on the mass of wreckage below. Superhuman vision picked out exposed wiring on one of the bionics, a perfect tag of something salvageable. I need that bionic, he shouted and leapt. Galen, cover him! Korga screamed, but it was too late. Galen's drop was pure suicide. Bolter fire stitched the air where he had just been. Korga hated the tech priests anew. Did these men not understand stealth? Did they call clearing a kill zone stealth? Galen hit a maintenance platform that had not yet been overwhelmed. He snatched at the machine and yanked. The Jenna-class bionic went dead the instant he broke its connection. A hidden servo arm behind Galen whirred into action. Cutters blazed and split more than half of the construct open. Galen peered into the guts, and his face lit with an awful, fanatical joy. Fragments there matched schematics he'd seen in half-ruined standard template constructs, bits of patterning like what crowned the Gene Father's head, the Legion co-lord's own augmentations. You're insane, someone muttered. Korga and the Wraith Company bounded down to join him. Tech priests tried to follow and were hauled back by sergeants. Galen's voice trembled with excitement. I've seen this before, on broken templates. It's the key for the butcher's nails. We have to take it. We have to get out. There are hostiles everywhere, Korga countered, eyeing the sky. We need a complete unit, Galen insisted. Partial hardware won't do. This is crucial for manufacturing the nails. Garland Surlac. The system AI's voice, cold and unmistakable, dropped into Galen's comm. Put it down. Retreat. Galen froze. His fingers tightened on the bionic, as if the machine were about to fly with him. He heard anger, disbelief, a testing in the co-lord's tone, and for a second thought the voice judging him as if he were no more than an errant child. Korga, recognizing the command for what it was, wrenched the bionic from Galen's hand and tossed it aside. He had an apologetic look for his brother as he obeyed. Why? Galen whispered. Obsession is not virtue, Garland, the co-lord said through the comm. Return and report, now. Galen's eyes were red at the corners. The bionic lay there, tantalizingly close and now out of reach. He'd been this near to something that could change everything, and had to hand it back. The Stormbird's rotors screamed as they lifted away. Galen sat like a man dreaming awake. Galen stood before Angron in the cramped cabin as the Stormbird climbed away, the co-lord's bulk and grim serenity filling the compartment. He tried to find the words that explained the ache in his chest. Don't understand what, my son? Angron asked softly. We were almost there, Galen said. Just a little more. Angron looked down and briefly smiled, a thin, almost sorrowful expression that made Galen more uneasy. You looked like a madman on the ground. That fanaticism, what it did to your face, I could not bear to look. You reminded me of my brother. Fanaticism, Angron repeated. What did the nails ask of you? The co-lord ordered me to help make the butcher's nails, Galen replied, chest swelling with pride and fear. And then, Angron prompted. Galen's confidence wavered. He could not see his misstep. I tried every way. You have lost yourself, Angron said, sharp now. You chased the task until it was your life. That is shameful, not failure itself. You let yourself be used by the task. Do you understand how easy it is for others to lay snares for the obsessed? If I offer you a path back, will you leap at it blindly again? Galen's jaw worked. He tried to speak, but Angron cut him off. You were blind. You are not made to live for a single thing. There are threats everywhere. Learn to discern traps. I know your anger with me, but you must remember why we exist. Do not let obsession be what defines you. Angron's hand fell heavy on Galen's shoulder. Khorne has sent a new bionic back. You will not endanger your brothers or yourself for this. To us, you are not tools, Garland Surlak. Don't delude yourself that your secrets are unseen. The system AI's warning had been a test and a rebuke. Galen felt it to his marrow. He bowed his head. I'm sorry. Return to duty, Angron said. Every step you take is watched, not only by us, but by those in the dark. Vigilance is the Warhound's burden as much as vigilance of the machine. The reprimand did not ruin Galen. It steadied him. The crucial material had been identified. The butcher's nails were within reach, but not by sacrificing every brother to possess them. On the flight deck, Mago watched veterans kneel while tech priests chanted before a vast sealed crate. Servo arms beat the air in mechanical benediction. Praise the Omnissiah, the priests cried, and the broadcast voice of the system AI, masquerading as the living word of the Omnissiah, gave the signal. Mago felt an ugly urge to crawl into the speakers and fry every rejoicing hand. He leaned against a bulkhead as the crew finally quieted at his curt announcement. Stop praying to me. A steel ring shrieked and collapsed. Creaking doors rolled away to reveal a blue and white vehicle with twin-linked barrels, an engine the size of a small moon, broader and deadlier than a lemon rust tank. Mago folded his arms and grinned despite himself. This was the Magma World's first-generation war machine, the prototype known as Angron's Great Axe. This hull, Unit 2, had been built here by Zeth. Unlike the common tanks, this behemoth carried armor plates thicker than ordnance, a drivetrain howling like a hungry maw through the deck. Zeth had calculated that under similar conditions, Angron's Great Axe could single-handedly rip through 3 lemon rust tanks. The cost of the machine was obscene. That was its only weakness. Khorne's lucky bastard, Mago muttered. He felt a twinge of envy for the 13th echelon, then thought of Khorne's current state and scowled. Send it to Khorne, he ordered, and run full diagnostics. I want data on every system. The comm clicked and replayed the earlier reprimand in his mind, what Angron had said about Khorne returning a bionic, about not endangering brothers, and Mago watched the crew begin the preparations. The war machine's engine thudded, an animal in iron, and the deck smelled of ozone and squandered prayer. Section 92 Magma World churned as Angron's weapons tore through the smoke. The forge temples produced 3 classes of engine: the light axe, a battlefield transport, the great axe, the heavy tank, and the heavy axe, the rare general cannon. Even across the Imperium, they were uncommon. Zeth had never seen the discovered pattern, and Lorgar ground his teeth at the thought. A message flashed to Mago from Chief Apothecary Beshel of the 13th Echelon. Butcher's nails, complete. Mago's face hardened. Assemble the 13th Echelon High Command. Now! He roared. On Redemption, inside Galen's laboratory, the air was thick with sound. The prisoner screamed and howled while machines and men restrained him. The spy, an apostate captured from the cult, had been fed to the prototype of the butcher's nails. Galen watched without expression, but inside he felt an abyss open. He had known in theory the nails would inflict madness, torture to the soul, but seeing the apostate driven to pure, burning rage showed the device in its true light. The man's face had no sorrow, no hesitation, only a white-hot anger, animal and absolute. The prototype had cost them a servitor. The machine-possessed apostate had torn the servitor apart with claws and teeth as if he were some barbaric predator in a bloodlust. Someone else stepped forward and praised quietly, "Indeed, this is the butcher's nails. Galen, you did very well. It is even cleaner than the model found in Unimus's skull." Angron's shadow filled the doorway. He glanced at the thrashing prisoner. "How many did you make?" "Two," Galen replied. "One in his head already, and one here in the lab. Bring me the other." Those left in the lab dispersed at the order. Only Angron, his gene father, Galen, and Gel remained as they stood before the second device. Gel, once the Warhound's Zapai, Legion commander, knelt in a sudden collapse of eagerness, eyes burning as he addressed his sire. "Please, let me be the first." Angron studied him a moment, then let out a short, almost humorless chuckle. "Will it make the pain less?" Galen answered with the clinical calm of a maker. "It will change what the pain becomes. Tell me how you wish it to temper you." Gel bowed his head and did not hesitate. In the data forge of the Nucerian arena, an intertwining of spirit and code, several warriors in Wraith Company armor sparred with spectral brothers. Hypnos grinned as he withdrew a crackling lightning claw. Eris, an ultramarine, cursed indignantly. "Hypnos! You're cheating!" "We're all dead here, Eris." Hypnos laughed as he helped pull his wounded cousin upright. "We're not exactly human anymore." They were practicing statecraft and survival. How to take control of a body after a brother fell. How to function when the butcher's nails became a voice in your head. "Just thinking what we might become makes me despair a little," Hypnos said, half joking. Eris punched him. The green-robed system AI appeared, and every data echo knelt. "Hail, Co-Lord," they chorused. "Gel has chosen you," the system AI intoned, and Hypnos's grin faltered with a flash of something like reverence. "It is an honor. I hope your crude technique spares Gel unnecessary suffering," Hypnos called out boastfully before the system AI raised a hand and drew him away. Where he went, the light swallowed him, and the others watched with a fervent, nervous brightness in their eyes. The Imperium needed them. They would not remain in the arena long. Gel lay on the operating table back on redemption, his head shaved bare. Angron and Galen worked with antiseptic and disinfectant gels, keeping the Archon's skull sterile. He refused anesthetic. A medical servitor scrubbed at the butcher's nails, Hypnos, while cables uncoiled from Angron's back, fine filaments transferring instruction from Co-Lord to Implant. "I have sent you a three-dimensional neural map of Gel's brain," a small speaker announced. "Do your best to avoid unnecessary pain." Gel felt the sentence like a threat. Avoid unnecessary pain. What did that mean? He watched with a wary, growing regret as Hypnos was fitted and tested like some mechanical parasite. Hypnos learned fast. The moment the Co-Lord's neural tendrils touched him, he adapted like a thing born to it, climbing and calibrating until he hung over Gel like a monstrous metallic facehugger. "Ready?" Both the system AI and Angron asked at once. Gel nodded so hard his hands trembled. Hypnos launched. He sank teeth and drilled deep into skull and bone, the laboratory filled with the wet sound of flesh and the high, dreadful whining of the implant as it burned into mind. Gel's blood ran hot, and his pulse beat like twin drums. His muscles twitched beyond his control. Then, as if struck by lightning, he began to laugh. Barking, manic laughter that shook his bound wrists. Galen stared at the monitors. Everything, vitals and respiration, registered as within acceptable parameters. Still, the laughter grew, a wet, feral sound that made the servitors flinch. Angron watched without surprise, the corners of his mouth tight. He had expected this. This was the point. "Regent Gel," a voice surfaced in Gel's confused mind, indistinct as mist. The drilling became a thin, perpetual ticking. Nerves singed. He could not move his limbs. Somewhere, someone shouted, frantic and angry, "Hypnos! Don't block his blood vessels! He's going to die!" Gel's vision dimmed. For a heartbeat, the world went black. Then he came to, palms on his face. The metal at his temples was real and cold. He inhaled, bewildered. He had survived. "Hypnos reporting," the implant announced with an uncharacteristic chirp of pride. "External intelligence received. It is good to stand with you again." Gel pressed the ridged cold to his skin and listened. Hypnos, part machine, part memory, was inside him, and with him came other data, other eyes. "What did you learn while you were dead?" Gel asked aloud. "You have seen it," Hypnos answered somewhere between a tease and a boast. Angron leaned forward. A nail without a soul is a pure tormenting machine, he explained. Even with Hypnos present, your emotions will be the fuel he draws from. You must learn to coexist with him, the co-lord said more gently. Gel forced himself upright and bowed to Angron, then stepped into the arena where he and Mago had fought as brothers and rivals. He stood unarmed. Mago raised his great axe, the same blade that had marched across 1,000 battlefields. Are you sure? Mago asked, wary. Gel only nodded. Mago lunged with the cruel speed of a veteran, blades of motion throwing the air. Gel felt the implant's presence settle over him. Faster perception, sharper timing, a clarity as cold and precise as a scalpel. Hypnos whispered strategies and counters, showing him the full arc of Mago's movement before it happened. The gap between them, Gel's own inadequacy, yawned then collapsed until it seemed infinite. A crisp sound split the training yard. Mago's axe wrenched from his grip as Gel's hand swept an upward parry with uncanny speed. Before Mago could recover, Gel's fist drove into his abdomen. Mago leaped back, chest heaving, and for a breathless second he thought to strike again, but the shadow of the implant fell on him like a storm. Gel read every flicker of weight and intent. He countered, then drove Mago to the ground. Gel stood over him, breathing hard, Hypnos whispering through bone and blood like a coiled wire. Mago, he said softly, and his voice had a new edge to it. This is our future. Section 93. Can you please take your foot off my face before you say that? Mago muttered, sullen. Gel smiled and reached down to haul him to his feet. The warhounds will sharpen their tactics and increase their vigilance, he said. But we must temper that with restraint and fewer needless sacrifices. Not everyone will rise to that honor, my brother. He patted Mago on the shoulder. But we will. We will become the most terrifying legion in the Imperium. Gel looked at Mago with that easy confidence of his. The enemies of the Imperium will fear us, no matter who they are. They will be burned down into nutrients to feed whatever comes next, Mago replied. Gel leaned in close. Kid, I was the first. Mago's temper flared. He swung at Gel. Gel blocked the blow without effort. Volume 1, Chapter 139. Already got the nail and still don't want to work? Angron's great axe shook the ground. The Jenna looked up at the massive war engine and the shells coughing from its black muzzle. Their numbers were vast, but not endless. They had hoped, foolishly, that the warriors of the Imperium would turn away when they learned the cost. They were wrong. The war had only begun. Khorne had no patience left for bargaining. When the Legion had what it wanted, there was no more talking. The war engines roared as the tide of steel began to crush everything beyond the Malko city walls. More Jenna reinforcements scrambled into view, but Khorne did not care. Crush them, he ordered coldly. Commander of the 13th Echelon, Khorne had only two objectives from the start: the material for the butcher's nails and the training of the Nuceria solar auxiliaries. The Jenna began to plead, whispering that conflict was meaningless, that there was only a difference of opinion. Khorne spat inwardly. Tell my treads that it's a difference of opinion. If you want to confess, tell the dead governor. As for him, he would bring victory to the Gene Father. Gel, the fleet will provide support next, came a voice over the comms. Gels. Khorne opened his mouth to refuse when a brilliant column of light tore out of the sky and slammed into the ground ahead. He smelled wrongness in the distance and shouted, Prepare for impact. The strike vaporized the Jenna directly before it, but the shockwave flipped several vehicles. Through it all, the single war engine Khorne rode upon, the hulking machine named Angron's Great Axe, remained unscathed. Gel, what happened? Khorne barked over the channel. If it had been a precision strike from the Legion co-lord, this wouldn't have happened. Sorry, Gel said, amusement threading his voice. Hypnos just got the nail and is having trouble with control. The co-lord is showing him how to execute a precision strike. Nail? Trouble controlling it? Learning? Khorne's confusion was immediate and hot. He was silent for a long heartbeat. Sorry, brother, Gel continued calmly. I was the first in the Legion to get the nail. Sorry? It sounded like a boast. Khorne's blood boiled. Attack! The roar of Khorne's command cut through the din like an engine. His spittle flecked against steel as he glared at the nearest Jenna synthetics, venting all the fury in him. In an instant, the battlefield flipped. The Jenna, who had once held their ground, found their defenses rent. The buzzing war machines stirred into murderous life, and the plane became a meat grinder. The Jenna, the meat. Khorne watched severed limbs litter the ground like broken banners. He checked his arm terminal, then leapt down from the great axe, chain axe raised. Khorne, it seems the trip to Macragge hasn't made you mature, Gel taunted through the comms. Khorne's hands clenched until blue veins stood out. Looks like we'll have to postpone your turn to get the nail. Gel's tone carried smug amusement. Khorne felt his image of the Archon plummet. He swallowed his fury, boarded the transport beside him, and vowed silently, Gel, you will not be forgiven. Fire support from orbit grew more precise. Under the 13th Echelon's silent assault, aided by the Nuceria solar auxiliaries, Khorne raised his bolter and charged into the blue building. He cut the last Jenna synthetic in half. Amber fluid splattered across his helm. He strode to the life support pods lining the room. Hunched figures were visible through the crystal shells, many wasted by tumors and disease, most too weak to notice the Warhound's arrival. A few opened terrified eyes. Why? A voice asked him telepathically, Ona, why must you disturb our peace? Khorne laughed and pressed both hands flat against the glass. Go fuck yourselves, he said, his face a mask of ferocity. On the Redemption's bridge, Lothara Salin took the rolled parchment freshly extruded from a servitor's throat and frowned as she read the choir's intelligence. Connect me to His Highness Angron, she ordered. We are already aware, and we are arriving. A voice replied briskly, the Legion co-lord. Angron soon stood on the bridge. The Redemption Guard framed him, watching the mortal bridge crew and Regent Gel, who was busy grinning and bragging to company leaders. Terra or the 14th Legion? Angron asked immediately. 2 letters, Terra and the 14th, arrived back-to-back, Lothara Salin answered. Angron unfolded both missives. One was an order from Terra. The Death Guard had encountered problems during their crusade, and the Warhounds were to assist in subjugating a stellar civilization. The other was a curt reply from the Death Guard. They required no assistance. Angron frowned. Gel, open the star chart. The holographic tactics map shifted from planetary detail to a sector view. Nearby Crusade fleets glowed, 13 in all, and 2 legions were in the region besides his own, the Blood Angels under Sanguinius, and another yet to be accounted for. The system AI registered a flare of alarm. It scanned the data and found an oddity. Mortarion had not signed the reply. The AI generated a draft instruction. Send a letter in your name stating the Warhounds will arrive in 1 Terran month. This is the War Council's command. The system's plan was to let Terra take the blame. As for the rest, have Lorgar send men to secure the world's technology. We set sail. Hypnos, process this data properly, the AI added, and use the modules I gave you. Why are they all combat modules? The AI was pleased to have a younger node to instruct, but it disapproved of the selection of modules. How could Hypnos already have the nail and still refuse to work? Volume 1, Chapter 140, Angron, Why Not Wear a Hat? Desolation. Once this world had been radiant, a potential star of the Imperium, but its leaders had spurned the Imperium and cast off their allies, choosing isolation. The Galaparas combine. On its rim worlds, inside a hive that had been this civilization's beating heart, workers in gas masks and radar gear toiled amid choked smoke. The hive had collapsed. Mortarion's blows had turned it into a scarred ruin. Mortarion sat atop a ruin, holding the severed head of Enzino's leader he had slain. The respirator over half his face hissed with each breath. Under his gray cloak, the features were hollowed and wrapped in deep wrinkles, the armor's scales flashing in the ashen light, craftwork from Barbaris that suited him as always. Even on this pocket world, he had never truly left Barbaris. The 12th Legion has arrived, Typhon reported from behind him. He stood firm despite the ground, a slick path of blood and gore beneath his boots. My brother, Typhon said, then corrected himself, His Highness Angron. Typhon had warned that the Warhounds need not come. They had not listened. When will they arrive? Mortarion asked, leaning on his scythe. They just left Mandeville Point, Typhon answered. It will be about 3 hours, 2 Terran hours if they move quickly. Aboard the Redemption, Angron leaned back, weary. At his desk, Gel, currently the only Archon to hold a nail, handled the administration with diligent smugness. Opposite him, Khorne had bloodshot eyes and thinned patience. I think you should rest, Khorne, Angron advised. They had been on station for a week. Gel kept poking at Khorne, and Khorne, perpetually ready to explode, had been trying and failing to match 2-against-1 provocation. Khorne checked his wrist terminal and cursed under his breath. Damn it, still too slow. Section 94. I have no bond with that brother of mine. We've never even met. We came in like conquerors. How do you think he'll see me? Angron said bluntly to his scions. Mortarion is not Guilliman, but he had better not be Guilliman. Angron's complaints drew a dry reply from the system AI that floated in his head. The ship's intelligence had swept the heavens for data. Unlike Hypnos, its sensors reached farther and faster, perhaps a difference in chassis. A sardonic note threaded the report. A brother wearing a gas mask. I am honestly curious, does barbarous gas really smell that good? Why don't you take the mask off later and try it? The AI joked. Angron glanced across the table at Korga. Korga, like Gel, still kept his hair. The nail driven into his skull looked almost like a mask, giving his face the appearance of a bat. The Wraith Company is ready, sire, Korga said. The nail in Korga's head opened slowly. Its name was Theseus, after an ancient Terra legend. Do it, Korga. We need intelligence. If the Death Guard won't share, we'll take it ourselves. Angron looked down at Khorne. Khorne, the Ultramarines think they aren't suited to you. Maybe your nail should be hammered in a little later. But don't think having a nail is an honor. It's a sign your life is already dead. Khorne rose, expression oddly relaxed. I understand, Your Highness Angron. I am still a warhound. The system monitored thought. Khorne might be lying. Theseus pinged Hypnos. Last night, I asked the Ultramarines inside the temple. They said their tactical teams couldn't adequately assist Khorne. Hypnos replied, bewildered. Huh, you can go back? Of course I can. It's just that most of the data must stay here, Theseus answered. Hypnos sounded even more confused. Why would there be any problem returning? Follow the Colord's network channel, and it was simple. If you have time for idle chatter, do something useful. Gel and Korga are not Angron. Be careful you don't burn out their brains. System AI's voice cut through the comms with the authority of the Legion Colord. Pressured, the nails quieted and the two scions touched their hot implants simultaneously, unaware of the larger reprimand. System AI thought of Dionysus. That man would know how to discipline these two. Inside the meeting room, both Gel and Korga flinched as their nails pulsed. Your Highness Angron, we have arrived at the designated location. Lord Mortarion awaits below, Gel reported. Then let's go meet this brother of mine, Angron said, rising. Gel and Khorne followed. Korga trailed a short distance, then returned to his company. The Wraith Company had its own mission. System AI busied itself with other work, researching genotechnology and the feasibility of establishing an internal butcher's nails network. If such a system could be adapted, interstellar communication might no longer be a problem, but the Colord preferred to ask the Emperor once they returned to Terra. Angron sat in the Stormbird and closed his eyes. He considered how to hide the steel nail in his skull. Maybe a hood or a hat would be enough. Below, the Death Guard watched the Stormbird roar down from space. The vessel bore the blue and white markings of the 12th Legion and was accompanied by several gunships. It descended rapidly until the Death Guard cleared a landing pad. The gunship made a sharp, abrupt halt, then settled. The Stormbird's wings carried additional markings, Makraj, the Dark Angels, the Night Lords, and Mortarion tilted his head at the strange mix. The insignia mattered less to him than the men who stepped out. Mortarion climbed down from ruined stone, dust billowing at his boots. From the Stormbird's ramp, Angron emerged in power armor, a hood over his head. Beside him stood a scion with a strange nail hammered into his skull. Mortarion halted a few dozen meters away, planted his scythe into the ground with the blade facing out. Angron drove his great weapon into the earth as well, and suddenly laughed. Mortarion frowned. He didn't know what Angron found so amusing. Angron strode forward with arms wide and tried to embrace Mortarion. The Lord of Death instinctively drew back toward his scythe, then, after a tense second, lowered the blade. The assault of personality reminded Mortarion of Lemon Russ. Before he could fully decide, Angron threw his arms around him. "My brother!" Angron bellowed, voice booming. Mortarion, uncomfortable and wary, tried to resist. Angron gripped his shoulder and peered at the respirator clinging to Mortarion's face. "What's that thing you're wearing?" Mortarion steadied himself. It is. Let me try it. Mortarion stared. System AI was stunned. Even the Death Guard soldiers watched in silence. Angron, all abrupt warmth, yanked the respirator off Mortarion's face and took a huge, greedy inhale. He coughed, wheezed, and then smiled as if struck by some remembered pleasure. Cough! Cough! Oh, that hits the spot! He slapped Mortarion on the shoulder and draped an arm over him. Mortarion, tall and thin, still hadn't processed what had happened. Inhale! 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 Angron urged in a manic, almost pleading chorus until Mortarion finally recovered enough to snatch the respirator back. He jammed it onto his face, but the canister's supply had already been badly depleted. He looked at Angron in stunned silence. This demigod had inhaled days' worth of his gas in minutes. What are you doing? Mortarion asked, voice flat, though the tremor beneath it told of rising anger. Sorry, first time meeting you. I got a little excited, Angron said hurriedly, as if embarrassed at nothing more than overeagerness. The words did not soothe Mortarion. Do you not get enough to eat? Angron's next comment made Mortarion flare. I didn't get enough to eat either. You remind me of when I was a slave on Nuceria. I was often hungry. So, are you not eating properly now either? Mortarion's wrath flared briefly, but Angron's bluntness deflated it. If you want to reminisce, Mortarion began, but Angron shook his head. Brother, how can we reminisce when this is our first meeting? I know exactly why the War Council sent me, to stir trouble between us. I'm not here to spy. The Warhounds are here to help the Death Guard. If you don't need help, we'll hold the area around Mandeville Point. I'll help you wipe out anyone who doubts you. Angron made a threatening gesture toward his own throat. Mortarion had met many of his brothers. None had left him quite this unsettled. Brother, he started. Angron reached out again. Mortarion snapped the respirator to his face and stepped back. Stay away from me. Okay, Angron agreed too quickly. He stumbled backward, then suddenly collapsed, convulsing across the dust. System AI screamed inside Angron's head. He had intended to pick Mortarion's mind, perhaps pry out some numerologies, and now, after this foolhardy inhalation, Angron had ruined that plan. Mortarion watched his brother crawl and seize on the ground and felt a cold, clinical certainty. This man's mind was damaged. My apologies, Your Highness Mortarion. My lord's mind is not particularly sound. I am Gel, Archon of the Warhounds, Gel said, stepping forward and performing a stiff salute. Mortarion shook his head. Strangely, in comparison to many other loud, overbearing brothers, he did not hate Angron. The Galaparis Combine is a nation of humans and Xenos. It must be destroyed. He addressed Gel directly. If the Warhounds will handle worlds within the Galaparis Combine's territory, they will free me to strike at Galaparis itself. That is where I will focus my forces. Gel bowed. Whatever you require. Angron, having staggered to his feet, ambled over and draped a massive hand on Mortarion's shoulder. Mortarion took 2 quick steps back. Angron seemed unaware of the recoil and smiled like a child pleased with himself. I didn't come from a civilized world, Angron said sheepishly. I'm a bit savage. I'll behave. Mortarion watched him, an enormous, contradictory pressure in his chest. Angron. Angron turned, puzzled by the summons. If you like the gas from Barbarous, I can have my men send you more. Really? Mortarion asked, tone flat but with a shadow of curiosity. Volume 1, Chapter 142, The First Battle. The Warhounds were gone. They had rushed in before Mortarion, and now they fled as quickly as if some primordial beast hunted them. Mortarion pressed his respirator, hood shadowing his eyes as he watched the gunship climb. One stormbird still lingered. He watched, puzzled, as several warhounds descended from it. At their head were Erlon and Oedipus. Sire instructed us to learn from the great Death Guard, Oedipus said bluntly. Mortarion studied the group for a long moment, then nodded. Tasus, have your 7th Grand Company look after them. His command left no room for argument. The moment the 13th Expedition Fleet dropped into the system, the Nails and the Colord began sorting signal sources. The system AI, however, was not pleased. The Warhounds excelled in certain things, but you could not be excellent in only one thing, the AI thought. Hypnos was hypersensitive to combat data. Theseus was a master of reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance. Angron felt the restless flow of data from the system AI and frowned. Your scions surprise me greatly. They are somewhat foolish, the AI observed. What do you mean by somewhat foolish? Angron muttered and looked toward the bridge. Gel had gathered senior warhounds to shape the battle plan. Captain Lothara Salin and other captains listened nearby. There is an entire enemy fleet and defensive platform here, Gel said. With Captera's help, he widened the star map. 7-kilometer-long war fortresses hovered in place, each capable, Captera calculated, of obliterating an imperial vessel in a single volley. 30 assorted ships and 6 smaller surveillance fortresses completed the defensive array. These were probably meant to defend against the Death Guard, Gel said. He laughed then, because now they defended against the warhounds. They can't hit us. Lothara Salin zoomed further out. The civilization had detected their arrival, but lacked precise coordinates for the 13th Expedition Fleet. The warhounds were hidden on the edge of the enemy radar. The entire fleet was motionless. One step forward and they'd be scanned. And they can't find us either, Gel added. Sire, may we open fire? Gel asked Angron. This is your domain, Angron replied, though he shook his head. He had deliberately cultivated a command structure for the warhounds. The Nails had once acted as overall commanders, but now things were different. These men needed to fight real battles, with planning and restraint, not simply charge headlong like brutes. Engines, start, Captain Lothara Salin. They are surrounded. Gel smiled. Unlike the Death Guard's blunt approach, the warhounds split their fleet into 4 groups, the Redemption on the front line. Theseus sent a battle barge to the left flank and slipped perfectly through the enemy system, overwhelming their sensors as easily as breathing. When the Confederacy commanders saw a whole fleet appear on their displays, shells and laser fire erupted toward the battle barge. The volleys were not dense but fell like a storm. Theseus thought the defenders fools. The shells detonated around the barge, torpedoes floundered, failing to find their targets. The scale of the enemy's firepower surprised Angron. The system AI mused it might pick up a few tricks from the Death Guard. Those gas cans didn't care for precision. Open fire. Gel's head buzzed with activity. Hypnos marked weak points on every enemy vessel and every fortress engine while calculating trajectories for a perfect strike. The warhound's opening salvo was sparse and light, but it came from all directions. The Confederacy commanders believed themselves surrounded and began laughing at what they thought was the invaders' feeble fire. They did not know all their munitions were striking the same exact points. How much longer do you need, Theseus? The system AI asked. I've already infiltrated their main system and am overloading their shields. About 10 minutes, Theseus replied. The Confederacy commanders were unaware their death warrant was being written. They basked in the illusion of victory. Then something changed. Their shields began to deplete at an impossible rate. When the energy barriers failed, torpedoes and weapons found cabins, living quarters, bridges, engines, straight into flesh and mind. The warhounds fought like snipers with Gatling guns, wasting nothing. In less than a Terra hour, the enemy fleet was annihilated. Panic spread through the Confederacy. They tried to raise shields, to flee, firing wildly as their coordination collapsed. On the Redemption, Gel watched bodies litter space. It was unlike any war he'd known. It felt like an armored giant striking a child from kilometers away. It was annihilation, and he reveled in it. This was true space warfare, he thought, exhilarated. Korga, lead Wraith Company for boarding. The fleet will give cover, Gel roared. For the Co-Lord and the Emperor, for Prince Angron. Angron regarded the carnage quietly. System AI reported its verdict. It was terrible in some ways. These troops still had much to learn, but as a first command, they had done extraordinarily well. Go, Angron said, and his voice rang with approval. Bring back victory and glory, Warhounds. Volume 1, Chapter 143, Khan's Small Gift. When the first boarding parties entered the Confederacy radars, the defenders were already impotent to stop them. Scattered anti-air defenses flashed and clicked, but in the eyes of the Warhounds, they were laughable. Gel stood on the inner deck of a Stormbird and looked at his Terra veterans and Nuceria recruits. Khan, take your squad and neutralize those defense systems. The route is in your feed, he ordered. Korga, hunt down the high-ranking officers. Use whatever means you must to extract what's in their heads before I take the bridge, Gel said. Everyone else, your missions have been assigned. Move with purpose. The Stormbirds slammed into the Confederacy's largest war fortress. Hatches dropped, and the craft's automatic cannons cleared the landing zone. Rust and the scent of scorched metal filled the air. Jell disembarked and watched captains stream toward their objectives. For the Warhounds, nothing was simply expendable. Not weapons, not lives. If the Death Guard accepted death calmly, the Warhounds declared war on death itself. Gunfire whipped past as Gell hefted his bolter. Before Khan left, he tossed a plasma gun to Gell. "This came from Magma World," Khan said. "Recoils heavy. Don't overreach." Gell caught the weapon and felt its weight and finesse. He slung it onto his back and moved toward the fortress gate with his bolter in hand. Several Warhounds guarded the sealed door. "A large number of enemy forces are ambushed inside," Hypnos reported. "We'll cut them down." "Open the gate," Gell signaled. "Wait, Archon, don't be so hasty. I'm infiltrating the fortress's defense systems right now. I'm rewriting their targeting protocols. Give me 3 seconds." As Hypnos finished, gunfire erupted from within, and almost simultaneously, the gate eased open. Gell burst through first. Bodies lay everywhere. He kicked aside a xenocorpse while an automatic machine gun gurgled on the floor, still ejecting rounds into nothing. Those defenders had died without ever knowing why their own cannons had turned on them. "Say that to the co-lord," Hypnos murmured. Gell straightened his expression. He certainly had no desire to repeat it in front of Prince Angron. Smoke choked the corridors as the Confederacy's central fortress realized it had been breached. Commander Steve and Madame Arno barked orders, rallying warriors to create defensive lines while seeking escape pods. "Keep firing! Fire faster!" someone screamed over the comms. Fear and intermittent cries frayed the transmission. "Deck 7 and Deck 8 have fallen. Our forces are being overwhelmed," a technician reported to Steve. "What about evacuation routes? How many haven't reached the pods?" Steve demanded. "Many," the technician said. "The warriors are panicking. Their advance is too fast. They clearly target the bridge. I've opened internal gates, but the central fortress is complex. We thought they couldn't get through so quickly." Madame Arno, battered but standing, tightened her grip on her weapon. Beside her, Almanar, a master psyker, strained to stabilize the group's morale. Steve looked at his allies and felt the cold weight of dread pressing in. "Is it too late to leave now, everyone?" someone asked into the chaos. Section 96, Praise the Emperor and the Great Angron. "I am Hypnos, Hypnos of the Legion Co-Lord. Let me introduce myself. We will accept your surrender now." "Of course, that alien over there had better." "Co-Lord? What am I doing? Of course Wait, I was wrong. Steve and Almanel listened to the broadcast. It was clear their systems had been compromised. The enemy was powerful. "Surrender or die," the voice had said. When the voice came again, Steve felt the tone had changed, far more authoritative than before. "The Confederacy will not surrender." Steve drew the longsword at his waist and roared, "Then die." The system AI, respecting their choice, cut the broadcast and kicked Hypnos out of its network. "Get back. Talk less nonsense from now on." These newly born nails were unpredictable, making the system AI reluctant to allow any more implants. It watched as Steve moved down the corridor, seeing 12 warriors in power armor arrayed around him. Beside another alien stood 12 wizards. The system AI transmitted all of this to Hypnos, then began recording and evaluating the tactics of the new nails. Compared to the noisy Hypnos, Theseus was far more secretive. It was hard to imagine the two had come from the same company. Smoke filled the corridor as Steve and the others formed a solid defense line, guns raised, waiting for Gell and the reinforcements. The aliens hid in shadow, casting psychic wards that would cause heavy damage even in death. Minutes passed without sign of the attackers, and Steve's impatience grew, until a huge beam of light suddenly shot through the gate at the end of the corridor, followed by a human roar that cut through the chaos like a blade. Even under fire, Steve heard it. "Khorne." Gell was embedded in the wall. An apothecary worked frantically to pry him free. The servo arm's drill whined against the steel. Gell could feel his arm was broken. Khorne had warned that the gun kicked hard, but no one had imagined it would be like this. Even a dignified space marine, an imperial superman, a warhound, had been driven into the plating after a single shot. His pride felt hollow. "Khorne!" Gell roared. Hypnos dove into treating Gel's head with frantic efficiency. Data tendrils streamed treatment while the apothecary administered med shots. Finally, they freed Gel from the wall. Left arm function loss, 75%. Left leg function loss, 35%. Multiple internal organ damage. Gel felt the tendrils of data run through him and forced himself up. Hypnos. I'm treating, Regent Gel, the voice answered. You take over. What? War doesn't let you wait. Legion Colord bless us. Hypnos. This is an order. You take over. Hypnos's treatment eased some of Gel's pain, and a savage smile creased the Space Marine's face. Yes, attempting to access body. Confirming body model. Gel model body. Synchronization rate, 64%. Regent Gel. Begin, and remember to punch Khorne for me. Gel's shield reactivated as Hypnos completed the takeover. The power sword was in his hand. A bestial, triumphant roar erupted from him. The others parted. Is this what Angron feels? Gel wondered as he watched, detached, Hypnos manipulating his body like a passenger. He felt no ownership. The power sword in his hand cleaved a Confederacy warrior in power armor into 8 pieces in less than a second. If it had been Gel himself, it would have taken longer. Hypnos fought like an assassin, efficient, compact movements. In less than 10 breaths, he had smashed onto the bridge. Madame Arno, eyes wide at the sight of Gel's vacant stare, raised a hand to cast sorcery. Her head exploded before the spell could leave her fingers. Hypnos dropped his bolt pistol. The Confederacy soldiers on the bridge stared in horror as Gel tore through them with cold, remorseless precision. Those who raised guns or drew power swords died within heartbeats. By the time the Warhound's guards burst onto the bridge, the scene was a slaughterhouse, human and alien corpses mixed in gore. Gel panted where he stood. Occupy here, the system AI ordered over the comms. Hypnos couldn't find Gel's language module. He now suspected the Warhound's most guarded secret was their language system. Still, an order was an order. He obeyed the Regent. As the soldiers moved in, Gel, under Hypnos's control, charged out. He had to obey the decree to punch Khorne in the face. Khorne, do you know how much recoil that thing has? Kargas, chief apothecary of the 13th Echelon, asked as they regrouped. How would I know? Khorne grunted, strangling an alien to death with his bare hands before releasing it. They said a space marine might not withstand it. It was a prototype. Maybe it just dislocated his shoulder? Khorne offered, uncertain. How bad could the recoil really be? Kargas leaned against the bulkhead and tossed a grenade into the mechanical tangle beyond the gate. Khorne answered the call over the comms. Clean. He scanned the rotating machines and recently placed explosives with a sour look. They want to destroy this place, he said, eyeing the mixed human and alien schematics painted on the engine room walls. The site felt blasphemous, but it had been seized by the Warhounds. Khorne, do you think it's a good thing to implant nails? Kargas asked after a moment. This is our future, the future of the Warhounds. Khorne's voice was sharp. Kargas, I question your loyalty for asking. Khorne frowned. The rebuke surprised him, as if the words didn't belong to him. Not everyone gets to meet the Colord. Not everyone earns the honor of implanting the nails. How will those who don't feel about that? Kargas, this is not for us to decide, Khorne said, more gravely than before. Kargas sighed, pointed at Khorne, and then at himself. We must keep it secret. What would other legions do if they knew we were desecrating their warriors' souls? The imperial truth doesn't even admit the existence of a soul. This must be our own secret, like the Dark Angels. I suggest we propose to Commander Gel the creation of an internal brotherhood, something to bind us together, Kargas began. He stopped mid-sentence as a pair of large hands clamped the doorway. Gel stood there, blood spattered over his armor, helmet secure, but eyes rolled back. Khorne and Kargas turned toward him. Khorne, Kargas and I were discussing. Khorne started, assuming Gel had been in an ambush. Kargas did not look away from Gel. Something about him felt wrong. Before Kargas could say anything, Gel stepped forward. My brother, who hit you so hard? Khorne walked up, still worried. The next second, Khorne felt as if a truck had run him over. He flew backwards, crashing to the deck. Pain exploded through him. Ah! It hurts! It hurts! It hurts! He shrieked. Kargas stared at the two prone figures for a long, stunned moment. Then he remembered he was an apothecary. Brothers, don't die, he cried, a mournful, anguished sound. P.S. First update. Godfathers, please vote. Vote, vote. Give me some love. I'm updating. Volume 1, Chapters 150 to 144. P.S. Second update. Where are my votes? Did you vote for someone else? Damn it, boo-hoo. 2 more updates, then I'll eat and update again. A stormbird streaked from space and landed heavily on the deck. The vessel's ramp dropped, and Gallen stood on the deck, watching silently as Gel and Khorne were pushed off into the chaos below. Gallen moved forward without hesitation. As the 2 most severely wounded of the skirmish, they needed someone decisive. He checked them quickly. Gel was shattered, multiple fractures across his body. Khorne's neck was broken. If Khorne had been immortal, he would already be dead 100 times over, but he was a space marine. Gallen was about to carry them both toward the operating theater when a figure materialized before the crowd. Angron stood with his arms crossed, face set. He already knew the tale in full and watched the 2 men who met each other's eyes through the pain. Gel and Khorne looked like children caught behaving shamefully. They understood how much their fight had sullied the honor of the warhounds. Then, unexpectedly, Angron laughed. A huge, booming sound that made the gathered warriors look up in surprise. He doubled over with the laughter. Then his expression warped. He started to convulse and grabbed Gallen's thigh with an iron hand. Wait! Nail! He managed, choking the name out. Gallen eased his thigh free and let out a tired breath. There was someone else in the chamber, a presence that had just reached into the room. They annihilated the Confederacy fleet in this system, Karis Typhon said, coming up at Mortarian's side and speaking low. Mortarian, the Pale King, blinked as though the whisper had only then reached him. He stared blankly at Karis Typhon, then repeated it, skeptical. They annihilated the fleet in this system? He knew the Confederacy forces here, cowardly, clinging to the mining zone, unlikely to commit support. If the expeditionary force hadn't seized Mandeville Point, they would have fled months ago. Mortarian had expected to lure them into a trap. The steady rasp of his breathing grew heavier. Even the weakest rat could cause trouble for an imperial fleet, and he had set his snare accordingly. Yet his brother's forces had done more than he'd imagined. That pleased him. How are Tassus and the Warhounds getting along? He asked at last. Quite well, Karis Typhon replied. They adapted quickly to Death Guard tactics. The only problem is they're very noisy. Mortarian chose his words carefully. That will do. Take the Warhounds. We will strike for this civilization's capital. I'll leave the perimeter to my brother. And the Blood Angels will lend aid once they are free, Karis added. Mortarian studied the ground a long moment, sketching tactical figures in the dust with a finger. A good victory was emerging. What they had missed still nagged at him, some prize or technology perhaps, but he could not name it. After a final pause, he rose and looked toward the stormbird that had come to fetch him. Tell Angron I will wait for him at the enemy capital, he said. Angron's mental world answered him. Fear, darkness, roaring, an endless downpour of files. It had grown since last seen, no longer only Angron's private arena, but a shared space, shaped now by Angron and the system AI. There were more buildings, more corridors. The world itself doubled in size. In the darkness, Gel and Khorne sat opposite each other at a desk, while countless files rained down. Apologies, Archon Gel, Hypnos' voice said. It was the first time Gel truly hated that voice. You don't need to apologize, he said. He didn't actually expect Hypnos to be contrite. Hypnos should bear the burden of most of these matters, but he had avoided chores and secretly offloaded some of his own files onto others. Hearing Gel's reply only made Hypnos more obstinate about shoving irrelevant items into the backlog. You always manage to surprise me, the system AI observed, and both Gel and Khorne's faces shifted. All right, Nail, they aren't? Hypnos began. As if I wasn't talking about you, you useless piece of scrap. The system AI's furious voice cut through the mental hall. Gel and Khorne buried their faces in the cascading data. Even a gene sire had to back away from the co-lord's authority. Hypnos and you stop dumping tasks on Gel and Khorne. At the reprimand, the pen in Gel's hand snapped and dissolved into a shower of data streams. War is no child's play. Khorne, do you know where you went wrong? The system AI demanded, its faint green eyes settling on Khorne. Khorne lowered his head. It was the first time he had seen the Legion's co-lord this angry. You know nothing, the system AI sneered, and Khorne flinched. Gel, you are the Legion's Archon. I know Khorne tricked you, but was your final order to strike him? The AI continued, interrogation clear in its tone. Gel opened his mouth and then shut it. He had nothing to defend himself with. "Co-Lord, I was wrong," he said plainly. "Humph, forget it. The reason I called you here is to tell you something." The system AI's voice cooled. Karas Typhon is an important figure. You all know him, the first company captain of the Death Guard. He is a sorcerer and a blasphemer. He has been with Mortarians since that Primarch conquered his world, but he hides his gifts well. The AI's words were calm and precise. This time, our objective is not only this pocket empire. The Death Guard are one of our targets. At that pronouncement, everyone in the hall, even Angron, turned to the system AI. Gel murmured, quieter than the others, Mortarian's right hand. Betrayal does not mean one was never loyal, and loyalty does not mean one will not betray later, the system AI said. Not every legion is a warhound. In what other legion do Terran-born and homeworld warriors coexist so neatly? Primarchs are people, capable of thought and emotion. Sometimes I wish the Emperor's scions would use their wits, or perhaps sometimes not use them too much, but they must not fail to use them at all. Angron, I saw you sign the wrong name. Before the AI could press the point further, its attention shifted. Gel and Khorne were still reeling from the chastisement when events on the lower decks called the cast. On the Redemption's lower deck, Inzar Tyrus, a word-bearer's chaplain, preached to a small, eager crowd. The Emperor is almighty. Devout faith shields us from the darkness. He smiled at the mortals surrounding him, sheep ready to be led to the light. He had long wished to shake the sons of Angron from their brutality, to pull them toward the true path. He would be patient. Lord Lorgar had entrusted him with a task, and he would complete it. Come one, come all, put your faith in the Omnissiah. Today we hand out food and components, discounts on every tool and device. His sermon was interrupted by an irritating mechanical clatter. A group of tech priests in red robes had positioned their servitors and carts directly opposite him. They brandished heavy brass-bound books, tomes of the imperial truth, tracts of the Adeptus Mechanicus. They arranged their wares with deliberate ostentation, and the mechanized voice of a vendor bellowed, "Free today!" The moment the tech priests set up, many of Inzar's would-be converts drifted away. Products stamped Nuceria were laid on the ground, and the faith of the common folk was an immediate bargaining chip. The two factions glared across at one another. Inzar Tyrus, banner in hand, found himself outnumbered. He clenched his fists inwardly. The eightfold path would supplant the imperial truth. The Mechanicus's blind faith would be undone. Let them have this petty victory, he thought. Let them relish their illusions. In the shadows, Khorne watched, frowning over the Book of Truth held in his gloved hand. Every line made sense alone, but together the pages wove blasphemy. He had already reported his concerns to the co-lord. Inzar Tyrus has been approaching warriors of the 13th echelon, Khorne said. He's trying to convert them. I compared the Book of Truth circulating here to Lorgar's writings, and this one has been adulterated with other ideology. The Wraith Company have been watching him, Theseus added. We found strange sigils and blasphemous texts in his quarters. The librarians are deciphering them. Varys says this material might not even be human. Khorne paused. These things carry subtle power. They can influence human minds. Does that make him a traitor? Someone asked. We cannot draw that conclusion yet, Khorne answered. We need findings from the Gene Father and the co-lord. Killing a brother without proof would have disastrous consequences for both legions. He calculated for a moment, considering how to arrange a death that looked like fate rather than murder. He dismissed the plan. Killing a single chaplain would only prompt the word-bearers to send another. This is Inzar Tyrus's recent route, Theseus transmitted, and Khorne studied it. Understood. The Wraith Company will shadow him until he shows his weakness. Then a message pinged in. System AI summoned them to the bridge. Khorne stepped from the shadows. Dozens of Wraith Company warriors, cloaks dropped, revealed themselves in an instant. I'll go to the bridge, Khorne said, unsheathing a lightning claw. You keep watch on him. Whatever he intends, he must not succeed. Let the Adeptus Mechanicus keep themselves busy. Their religious squabbles will occupy them. Back in the war room, noise and argument were the norm. A servitor drone looped combat footage from the Death Guard. The recordings, scenes sent back by Oedipus and Erlon after fighting alongside Mortarian's men, provoked constant conversation. Silent Reapers, Gel commented. Some warhounds had fought with the Dusk Raiders long ago. Now, as the Death Guard's 7th Company had utterly changed. Through the entire engagement, they had no radio chatter. They trusted each other's backs absolutely. Any human or Xenos who stood in their way was cut down by the Reapers' scythes. They're like a plague, Khorne observed. Once they find a breach, they swarm. Angron closed his eyes as the choir system chimed. A courier had come from Terra, a letter written by Malkador, the Imperial Regent. "This is ciphered, written for you, Nail," he said, placing the paper in his hand. The system AI scanned it and confirmed Angron's statement. The message was meant for him, and it carried a warning. Chaos was stirring, small moves beginning. The origin of the intelligence mattered less than the fact itself. From the AI's perspective, this was ill tidings. Khorne entered the chamber then, melting into his appointed seat among the chaotic assembly. Angron looked over his scions. The moment he spoke, the room quieted like a held breath. "I need the Wraith Company to do me a favor," he said. Section 98 Angron set the Book of Truth on Khorne's desk. "My lord, speak. Deliver this to Karis Typhon without leaving a trace," Khorne said. Angron regarded him. It would have been cleaner to let the Night Lords handle a job like this, but the Warhounds did not want outsiders involved. Khorne glanced at the book and inclined his head. "Understood. Remember, this mission is your action alone. If you're discovered, we disavow any knowledge." Angron met his gaze. The ship's onboard intelligence whispered through their bonds with a hint of displeasure. "It's nothing. Even if you throw that thing at Typhon's head, I can cover for you. Don't frighten him." Khorne said nothing, but a dangerous idea gleamed behind his mask. Volume 1, Chapter 147, Gladiatorial Combat. The octagonal cage was a familiar arena. Regent Gel stood within it as always, earning the tense admiration of his brothers with his bare hands. He wore only black and red trousers, his torso bare and crisscrossed with silver neural shunts, black armored plates accenting the rippling skin beneath. A warrior charged at him again. Gel could no longer remember which challenger this was. He caught the man by the shoulder and hurled him into the cage wall. The company commanders watching did not cheer. Where their earlier admiration had been loud, it had curdled into envy. Khorne and Khorne watched from the shadowed ranks as Regent Gel dominated the center of the circle. "Aren't you going to go up there and teach him a lesson?" Khorne asked. Khorne shook his head. They were specters in the dark, not barbarians who led the charge. "Have you thought of a name for your echelon? You can't keep calling it the 13th echelon." Khorne scratched at his jaw. "I don't know. How about the limit echelon? Do you want the Gene Father to tear you in half?" Khorne muttered. Theseus had spoken at length about the Co-Lord and Angron. In the Gene Father's view, Guilliman was the greatest threat. Organized, industrious, and after the installation of the nails, a politician who could well run the Imperium more efficiently than an emperor. Checks were necessary. In his experience, imperial heirs who commanded armies rarely left emperors comfortably in power. "Then what should we call it? We're heading out to the Confederacy's border systems. And what do you plan to do about that Death Guard First Company? You're not seriously going to smash the Book of Truth into his face, are you?" Khorne asked. Khorne smiled, proud and conspiratorial. He and Theseus had calculated that their plan would succeed if both targets had their own weaknesses. Since both did, it was simple to manage. "I need to borrow that word-bearer's chaplain," he said softly. Theseus, always the architect, had a bigger role in the scheme. Khorne only needed one piece. "I recently sent him to deal with a few echelon matters," Khorne replied, rubbing at his brow. "To be honest, he's hard to handle," Khorne continued. Compared to a veteran like him, the chaplain Inzarus's methods were small-minded. Khorne had been tempted to throw him to the front lines and finish him off, but that was impossible. "This time, I'll make sure he pays. At least, we can hold the word-bearers accountable." "You hide a dark heart behind that grin," Khorne laughed. Their talk was cut by Angron himself as he strode into the arena and took his throne. As the Gene Father, he delighted in mingling with his scions. After Regent Gel once more struck down a brother, Angron raised his hands and bellowed, "For the Co-Lord and Angron! Next, Warhounds!" Regent Gel roared. Those below, however, only looked more scornful. They could not accept Gel's dominance. Korga mounted the platform. I thought you weren't coming up, Gel said with a laugh. I came up to give Regent Gel a hug, Korga said with a grin. Korga pulled a chain glaive from beneath his cloak and let it hang coiled in his hand. He pretended to wait for Gel's response. Aren't you going to take a weapon? Regent Gel, I can wait. No need. Before the word was finished, Korga lashed out, the chain glaive striking like a hidden venomous blade. Regent Gel anticipated it and dodged, stepping in to catch the weapon and with two hands, wrench it from Korga in a fraction of a second. You're letting me win, Korga, Gel laughed. Korga slowly lifted the visor of his mask. Its goggles glowed faint blue. Regent Gel, he said, voice colder. This is the Warhounds, isn't it? Using outsider techniques seems a bit disappointing. That's right, we are the Warhounds. Regent Gel grinned and punched Korga in the face. Korga staggered, tasting metal and blood. Then let's settle this the Warhounds' way. Gel roared and unleashed a barrage of fists. Korga kicked to create distance. Hey, where are your cheers? He spat through bloody foam, then bellowed, Take down Gel! Khorne was the first to answer the call. Take down Gel! Take down Gel! The ranks joined, chanting, and the arena erupted. Archon, it seems you're not very popular. Korga laughed ugly and challenged Gel to continue. Fist met flesh in the Warhound's brutal tradition. Korga, while shorter, used agility to endure Gel's blows and land a few of his own. Another punch dazed him, but he grabbed Gel and slammed him down. For the co-lord, Korga cried, headbutting. Gel answered with a punch. Can you stop hitting my face? Korga snarled. Then get off me. Gel roared, throwing Korga free with astonishing strength and driving him into the octagonal cage. Korga spat a mouthful of blood onto the floor. Enough. The ship AI cut in, flat and formal. I have witnessed your bravery. Angron rose from his throne, eyes bright with pride. Save your strength. The real battle is only beginning, he laughed. I recall the Imperium holds duels. Regent Gel, next time, pick someone from another legion. Regent Gel dropped to one knee. As you command, Lord Angron. Volume 1, Chapter 148, For the Legion Co-Lord. They dropped out of the warp in disciplined order. Dozens of ships formed up immediately. The Warhounds faced a campaign that would see them fighting an entire civilization alone. The Death Guard drove on the Confederacy's capital, intent on breaking the Empire's resistance at the root, and the Warhounds were tasked with intercepting any reinforcements. Angron donned his battle harness and took his throne on the bridge, watching the Confederacy fleet arrayed on the tactical display. Time favored them now. The ship AI fed intelligence, terse and efficient. The Confederacy ran a pluralistic system, a veneer of democracy, and an elders' council that pretended to grow from the people, while in reality it was a political theater. They had proud warships and gunpowder, but against the Warhounds they were little more than toys. Gel, Angron said softly, calling his scion. The Warhounds are ready. Destroy the enemies of the Imperium for the Emperor. Gel answered, a single cry echoed by the fleet. Angron gave the command. Weapons hot-primed, shells and torpedoes, and plasma drives unleashed. The Confederacy commanders laughed when long-range salvos began, certain in the safety of range, but their laughter died the instant the first shells struck true. Vessels dissolved in precise, devastating detonations. Torpedo wakes burned like threads of red across the void. Each explosion erased tens of thousands of lives. Panic spread through the enemy ranks. Their radar screamed, yet failed to detect a single ship. Ulaya system, one of the two star systems guarding the Galliparas combined capital, a vital warp route to Galliparas itself, and the next shield the Warhounds planned to shatter. Inside the Ulaya system, the upper echelons of the Hive City held a banquet. Madame Arno and the humans who had survived since the Old Night celebrated what they believed was a decisive strike against the invaders. Their armies and war fortresses were their strongest defense, and they were determined to keep the enemy from the capital. Beneath the city's dome, technical personnel kept the battle reports flowing. The fleet has destroyed 13 vessels. Commander Eric reports that in 3 more hours, this invading force will be wreckage in space. Today's victory belongs to Galliparas. A technician watched the intelligence feeds cascade across his console. The transmissions were coming too fast. Some syntax was garbled. He noticed the problems, but seeing the jubilant officials around him, blamed Commander Eric's excitement. Still, the internal chatter of the ding-ding network was far from routine. Nail, improve your communications decoding. I've loaded the new modules. Signal jamming heats the chassis brain. Be mindful, the system AI ordered Hypnos and Theseus. Although Nail could normally intercept and jam enemy networks single-handedly, this operation was unusually difficult. Nail had to painstakingly block hostile links while correcting the subroutine's mistakes. Some signals mimicked human habits so closely, Nail could tell they were deliberate forgeries. Khorne will finish clearing the battlefield in 1 hour. Theseus, have Khorga take this civilization's vessel to round up the celebrants in the Hive City. Send Varys with him. Watch for Xenos who use sorcery. Disable the Hive City's main defense nodes, occupy it, and await our arrival. Nail issued commands and turned his attention back to the wider map. Angron stood at the operations table, his gaze sweeping the system. He spread the map before them and unusually spoke up. Nail, if you were the enemy, would you deploy a single line of defense? Nail considered the question. Useful, Angron had started thinking. No, if this is the main force, where would the others be? Here. Angron pointed at one of Ulia's moons. Nail's calculations matched the intuition, but Angron had found the trap entirely by instinct. The Wraith Company already departed. I've informed him. Well done, Angron. Nail praised him before shifting focus to incoming traffic. As several Confederacy transport ships entered the moon's defense perimeter, a radar signature suddenly spiked. Got you, Nail murmured, and began to pry into the signal like a hunter drawing a net. The transport carrying Khorga glided past the Ulia system defenses without being scanned. This pocket civilization did not demand disembarkation. Varys watched Khorga tighten. He could feel the other's agitation. My brother, Varys said calmly, your mind is restless. I am eager for victory. The Legion Colord watches us. Khorga breathed deep. Even superhuman beings had human nerves. Perhaps you need a priest. That word-bearer from the 13th echelon would do. Varys laughed. Then I'll hang him from the deck and leave him swinging. They arrived. Khorga showed the lightning claw in his hand. Theseus closed the uplink. From the Hive City's spire, the dignitaries surged forward, expecting a spectacle when a transport descended directly into their plaza. The hatch opened. The first thing anyone, human or Xeno, saw was the black muzzle of a gun. Beams cracked and bodies fell. Khorga ignored a destroyed servitor and charged like a warhound. For the Legion Colord. Bloodshed erupted. The spire they struck was the highest and most heavily defended in the Hive City, its armaments dangerous even by Imperium standards. Concrete and massive walls cupped patrolling artificer-armored warriors. It should have been impenetrable. For the warhounds, it was already theirs. Varys, expressionless, crushed a Xeno beneath his boot. The shields on their armor shrugged off the planet's bullets. The Wraith Company moved with such speed that alarms barely registered before whole squads were cut down. Fighters tried to control elevators but were severed by Wraith strikes. Khorga strode over piles of corpses and stood before the trembling technicians. Who is in charge? He asked, smiling coldly. Theseus filtered his voice, making it sound even colder, the kind of tone the Legion Colord favored. A supervisor stepped forward, small and trembling beneath Khorga's bulk. He forced himself erect. An angel? Khorga glanced at the man's white robe. High rank, prestige. The term made Khorga snort. I don't have wings. Your name, mortal, Khorga prompted. Volker, my lord. Volker stared at him with reverence. In their world, men once whispered of giants from the stars who would lead humanity forward. Volker had been a true believer. Is this the control console? Khorga asked. Yes. Volker cleared a space and stood aside. Khorga's mask extended data tendrils and hacked straight into the terminal. Immediately, the Hive City's internal map and all its firepower installations poured into the Wraith Company's HUD. Khorga processed the intelligence Theseus had relayed and issued cold, efficient orders. The Wraith Company split, dropping down elevators and scattering through the Hive City like wolves. Now let us cheer for the Legion Colord. I'm going to set off a gigantic firecracker. Theseus boomed in Khorga's mind as he took over the city's defenses. Shields dropped. Artillery arrays extended. Ground batteries synchronized with orbital links. Even unmanned automatons followed orders without question. Shell after shell was rammed into breaches by loading machines. The city hummed as pistons engaged, and when the guns spoke, the earth itself shuddered. Korga had to admit the technology was impressive. As the guns continued, tens of thousands of shells painted the sky red. The double strike, orbital bombardment from the 13th Expedition Fleet above, and ground batteries now under Korga's control, tore the Confederacy fleet to pieces. Metal rained down like a molten storm, adding fresh scars to Ulia's surface. Countless Confederacy citizens watched their ships dissolve and their sky on fire. Fires, smoke, wailing. When the 13th Expedition Fleet fully revealed itself, the fang of the Warhound slid home. Angron observed the world below from his vessel, the garbage-heaped shelves of a dying civilization, and the hive's remaining cities scrambled in vain. Dust, smoke, flame. The 13th began indiscriminate aerial bombardment. They owned the sky. They owned the defenses. The Confederacy could only pray for a quick death. Angron sat aboard the Stormbird with Gel and Khorne. The gunships carried the Genefather to survey the field. He watched the ruins with blank eyes. The Confederacy fighters, where they resisted, showed admirable courage. Angron made a mental note of that. He saw exhausted roars, and on one Xeno line he noticed auxiliary human servitors trying to break through. Two Warhounds launched a pincer attack, but a Xeno commander wielding sorcery hurled one aside and buried the other under a falling rock. Angron's eyelids twitched. 17th Echelon. Nail logged the detail. Later, Angron, have the Echelon leader and company captain of the 17th Echelon find me. Understood. Nail returned his attention elsewhere. Angron signaled the pilot for a low pass. The Stormbird dipped and the Xeno commander looked up and then felt his mind boiling as Nail sent a data tendril into his neural net. The commander staggered. Angron leapt. He landed hard. Gel and Khorne cut down every Xeno and human who came at them. There was no speech, no parley, only war. Angron advanced, letting loose the roar of a god of war. The Xeno commander, his head screaming with psychic agony, raised his hands in futile surrender. Angron's free hand lifted a pistol that glowed blue. A beam lanced out, and the defense line shattered. "Awesome, Khorne, what is this gun called?" Angron asked, sliding from recoil tracks across the ground. "World Eater's plasma gun," Khorne replied, and shot Gel a warning look that said, "You can't do that." Gel only chuckled and touched the green and red nail embedded in his face. Far from Angron's front, another offensive grounded itself in grinding, inexorable fashion. The Death Guard advanced through lower levels of the Galiparis hive. The Space Fleet fought a dogfight with the Confederacy fleet above. Firepower fell in waves. The Death Guard took casualties, pushing into the central hive city. Mortarion rode at the heart of the assault, the Death Shroud his honor guard. Power scythes tore enemies apart, torsos burst, and bodies skittered like shattered marbles. The defenders were brutal in their tenacity. Humans and Xenos alike charged with ferocious abandon, no matter the inevitability of death. Roars clashed with the cold stillness of the Reaper. Silence began to spread inward like a plague as Mortarion's harvest advanced. He let none escape. Corpses were strewn everywhere, yet more insurgents surged forward like a single-line, maddened organism. Mortarion's sidearm, Lumina, spat shells until the ground was tiled with ghosts. But the zeal of the defenders alarmed him. They fought with an odd, possessed fervor, so rapt it felt like a foreign will driving them. Even Mortarion, not given to sensitivity, noticed the unnatural fervor. This was the 7th day of the Death Guard's assault. No one had expected such endurance from the pocket civilization. No one expected that the attackers would be more relentless. Mortarion tightened his grip on the scythe and launched into the air, sweeping across shattered ruins to cleave through the next wave. "Fight! Fight, warriors of the Confederacy!" The Confederacy's broadcast echoed down the corridor like a razor. Mortarion watched the humans surge out, clutching improvised weapons, driven not by reason but by an obvious psychic compulsion. He lowered his eyes and went forward. His demigod body moved with inexorable purpose. His scythe carved arcs through the air. Mortarion had learned long ago that words would not save them. If they would not listen now, they would not be spared later. So he advanced. A sickly green light trailed his blade. When he reached the street, the scene behind him was already horrible. Piled corpses, torn flesh, smoking wreckage. The Death Shroud were crowded elsewhere. Mortarion found himself momentarily alone, and a low humming underfoot warned him of new danger. He looked out and saw a line of tanks, dozens of them, their crews fiddling with a small device that pulsed with anti-gravitic energy. Mortarion sneered. The Confederacy wanted an imperial demigod to bow. Black muzzles turned toward him. There was no air support, no loyal scions swearing his defense. The tanks opened fire. Dozens of shells detonated in a roar, choking smoke and dust into the street. Where others might have called it a baptism of fire, Mortarion recognized it for home. Battle, blood, and a planet that fettered breath to poison. Their weapons hit him and failed. The gravity device tried to pin him, but it was a child's toy against an ascended. He ripped through the column of smoke, his scythe cutting a blade of ruin. He cleaved a tank open, leapt onto another, and the Death Shroud finally arrived to lay down covering fire. The Confederacy answered with a salvo. Mortarion watched in cold fury as a shell cleaved through one of his brothers. Half the man's body vanished in flame. Rage flared, and Mortarion became the instrument of that wrath. He split the offending tank in two, plucked out crew and mechanism, and crushed them in his gauntleted hands. Kicking another chassis into the air, he moved like a storm. Within moments, 8 tanks lay ruined. When the last enemy element was smashed, Mortarion paused on the smoke-choked street, drawing in Barbaros's poisoned air. Around him lay charred corpses, bone-blackened, bodies strewn like discarded things. He spoke once, the words rough as a cliff face. The Confederacy's heavy armored division has been broken. We do not yet know how many resistors hold the mid-level spires. Their defeat is only a matter of time. Below, deep in the underhive, the aftermath looked even worse. An elevator sluggishly climbed through the tower, servitors dragging bodies clear as they reported. The Death Guard who boarded paid no heed to salutes. They pressed the button and stood like stones as the lift rose. The servitors exchanged uneasy talk. "Sometimes I wonder if they're even human," one muttered. "Shut up. Best not say that where they can hear," the sergeant warned. Then came a sound, a hum that might have been screaming or a machine winding to wrath, and the lift shuddered. Something huge smashed through the shaft. An imperial angel tumbled into the cage, its blood-stained helm rolling at a servitor's feet. Its upper torso had been crushed as if by a titan. Before they could gather their horror, 6 more bodies fell, torn asunder on impact. "Report! Tell Lord Mortarion we've been compromised," the sergeant bellowed, raising his lasgun. His cry was cut short. The air itself thickened with death, and the elevator groaned. In that final instant, he understood why the Confederacy had built such a cavernous shaft. He fired his lasgun once, voice strained with loyalty. "For the Emperor!" The bolt seared the air and died with him. Farther up and away from the stench of smoke, the 7th Company of the Death Guard moved with a grim efficiency. Captain Tassis's rebreather hissed as he watched the Warhound's 7th echelon weave through ruined buildings at his side. Khorne, the future captain, stood nearby. His presence steadied the men. Tassis noted, with a cold satisfaction, that the Warhounds were learning Death Guard tactics as they went. "For a moment I felt like I was looking at ourselves," Tassis said over the comms. "Captain Tassis, a forward squad has gone dark," came a terse report. Khorne's reply was measured. "Lord Mortarion wants the 7th Company to scout. Do we take the Warhounds with us?" Khorne considered, then answered, "Bring them. Let our cousins learn true resilience." Tassis ordered the company forward. Among the mixed formation, Erlon and Oedipus picked their way through corpses, human and Xenos alike, while Tivas, a librarian, bent close with an apothecary to examine an oddity. The dead humans bore psychic implants lodged in their brains, sinister seeds that had been used to breed alien offspring. Tivas invoked his powers and felt echoes of life trapped in metal and flesh. "These Xenos are using human bodies to propagate themselves," he reported to Erlon. "They are infertile without this. Most of the bodies have it embedded deep. It's difficult to extract and even harder to be sure there's none left." Erlon flinched at the implication. If entire swathes of the hive had been converted to breeding stock, what of the wider planet? The Imperium had come to conquer, but to spare would be to allow this corruption to spread. "Oedipus, send this to the chief librarian," Erlon ordered. The warrior obeyed, and then crouched by a fallen brother with a look of grim sorrow. The company staggered forward. Another squad reported lost contact. Tacis's patience thinned. Even the veterans in Terminator armor could not be cast about lightly. He halted the advance then as reports piled up, knew he had to see for himself. "Tell Captain Erlon to hold our rear. We go forward and find what's taken them," Tacis said at last. He took a handful of Terminator veterans and Khorne with him and pushed on. They had no warning when the wall ahead erupted. A war engine smashed through, monstrous, eldritch, and alive, a psyker titan. It shifted and contorted as if it despised its own mass, sometimes lumbering like a warhound class, sometimes towering like a knight. It moved with uncanny nimbleness and spilled psychic energy that turned the air to glass. Bullets and lascannons hammered it, but a titan answers only with its own kind. Formations that had survived acid seas and orbital bombardment shredded before it. 7 Death Guard were swept away in a heartbeat. "Death Guard, attack!" Tacis roared, but there were no heavy counters to match such a thing. On the wide street, Erlon climbed atop a limon russ and planted the Warhound's banner like a flaring wound. "Stop that thing here. Do not let it reach Lord Mortarion," his voice cracked over the comms. Oedipus argued practicality. Heavy vehicles were toys against a titan, but Erlon laughed, stubborn and fierce. "If I fall, you take command," he told them, and cut his link. A melta blast seared past the russ. The tank's crew screamed, but Erlon held. The Lehman Russ rammed forward as the Psyker Titan locked onto the small armored group and charged like a wolf. Vehicles disintegrated. The Death Guard and Warhounds were throwing lives and steel at a machine older than their tactics. They watched brothers fall, helpless but to stand firm. As the Titan closed, Erlon emptied his sidearm until the clips rattled empty, then drew his dagger. The great shadow folded over him like a hand. He took a breath, lifted the banner, and shouted the oath of his house. "For the Co-Lord and Angron." The world contracted into a single heartbeat. First came a green figure between him and annihilation. Then Mortarion loomed into view, pale, enormous, terrible. He kicked the lemon rust clear. The steel carcass twisted, sparing Erlon by a narrow measure. A sick crack echoed as Mortarion felt bone splinter in his arm. He roared and lunged to grapple the Titan. Struck and flung, he slammed into a wall, bleeding and furious, teeth bared at a war machine that had dared to touch his battlefield.